Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Sean Bond of Sonic League, and we got a wonderful guest that I've met in Florida, Nathan Sizek, and for the project New Awakening. He's a very interesting person, has a lot of experience under his belt. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? How'd you get into this whole field and some experiences in your awakening?
Well, it's a long story, so instead of writing a verbal book, I'll just try to summarize it. I used to think I was a contactee. I used to think I was just a paranormal experiencer, and as it turns out, I'm actually a MyLab victim. So I've had an unusual life. I've had a lot of paranormal experiences, but most of it has been through a type of, I would call it an engineered or a false engineered awakening. So they knew, the handlers, military handlers knew that I was going to wake up and start to remember things. And I think their biggest worry wasn't so much remembering that I was in the programs or that there was something weird going on with me. It seemed like they were more, and this is just my hypothesis, that they were more concerned about me waking up to the nature of reality in my actual self than they were remembering something about something that was done to me. So, and for whatever reason, I have not had extensive memories like other people. I have fragmented memories. And most of what I've been through in regard to memory recall is actually in the area that I just described. It was the original self, the nature of reality and why I'm here, things like that, versus extensive program memories, which has been a rather frustrating experience, but I would say it's been kind of an enlightening one. So, and but anyway, yeah, I consider myself a disclosure activist. I never used to consider myself a researcher. So, but lately, I've noticed there's so many people going into the field that really have no experience, and for lack of a better term or phrase, can't find their rear end with both hands. And so I've done it I started researching this topic at 14. Prior to that, when I was just a kid, like 6, 7 years old, which is when some of the abductions I think started before that. But 6, I have one that was kind of vivid. I started looking into these topics. So whenever there was a commercial for a book that was out that was about strange occurrences, the paranormal, or if I'd see one in a magazine someplace, like a coupon inside of a book or magazine, where I would go to the library, it was always on these topics. It was mainly Egypt, UFOs, the afterlife, spirits, things like that. So it was really me following my intuition, because I was in an awakening process, and all I wanted to know was who I was before this lifetime and why people weren't psychic. Because I noticed that animals had abilities. I was having experiences. I'd look at people on TV, and then, you would follow up on it, and you'd find that either they were accused of being frauds or they weren't able to really support their abilities in a lab. And I wondered why that was, because I knew that from an intuitive point of view that all of us should be psychic, and that something was wrong with this reality. And I just kept finding more and more problems with not just this reality, but with the government and people's belief systems, and on and on and on it went. So it's just been 52. I just turned 52. So it's been 52 years of rediscovering what this really all is and why I'm here. So that's pretty much the gist of it. I started going public, I would say 2020 or 2021 or 2022, somewhere in there. I think it was 2021. And I took various stabs at it, and then finally got kind of like accepted. And because I didn't come through the normal avenues that you normally would, which is Facebook support groups for people who are in my labs, the super soldier community, SSP stuff. I had no idea that was part of that. I was at the time thinking I was a contactee, but as it turns out, I was under a controlled awakening. What I was dealing with was voice to skull handlers, and I was being heavily targeted. My health was as well. And they had me completely convinced that I was in an engineered therapeutic lifetime where I had to take hardships. But in fact, what that was a military MyLab suppression protocol, which made me sick, gave me a speech impairment. For the longest time, I still have a little bit of issues with that now, but it's just very seldom that I do. And so I've had to overcome that and a lot of things. And all of this kind of was done to me for also, well, for one, so that I wouldn't wake up. And if I did, I would wake up to a reality that they were shaping. And the other purposes was to keep me from, from being influential and going public and talking about these issues and these subjects. And I think waking people up. And helping them see through a lot of the because we're under constant assault of psyops where it's endless. It's in the media, it's with politics, it's with disclosure, it's with everything. I mean, nothing is as what it seems. And so, I could go on and on with that, but I'd rather not. We're all up to here with those types of conspiracies and open reveals and Epstein files and everything else. So don't want to go there tonight. But anyway, that's my shtick. So, or my introduction.
Nice. And so, what kind of things do you experience when you're getting targeted, attacked, military abduction, ET abduction? What have you noticed? And then I'll also ask again later about like any species that you know about.
Sure. Well, I do know one thing. They're very, very good at keeping a secret. And what I mean is keeping you from waking up. I had, when I was a kid, I had kind of a broken childhood, which was all by design. I remember my earliest memory, which came to me in sequential flashbacks over a period of years. And then I had one grasp of it, and the memory was in a white haze. And then years later, I got more flashbacks. And then what happened at that point was I reached a point where I could see through the haze. And then through hypnosis, I was able to see the room very, very clearly, but it was in a different context at that point, but it was the same room. I didn't relive the memory though. So what I'm talking about is I have a memory of a soul transference from a military installation into what became this physical container body, which was a fetus at 12 weeks from conception. That was something the handlers referred to as they told me that, and then I don't know if, exactly, because I know some of this isn't exactly accurate. They said that they like to put the soul into the body at 12 weeks. And they said something about if they don't put one in, that one will go in automatically. But they had said created, which I found out later, when something, say an animal's born or a human being, that's not the creation of their soul. That consciousness pre-existed the electromagnetic universe. So anything that happens here is just simply an experience, an extension of an endless number of experiences that we're having someplace else outside this universe, which we can talk later. But so anyway, I was put into an engineered lifetime, which is a MyLab containment type of protocol. So I look at, my physical body as an EM containment cage or an EM frequency cage. So it's more or less a container for the soul, but it's basically my prison. And so they've locked me into this. And what they did was that I remember going from the lab, and I was in the lab, and there were several technicians in there, and there was a machine that was to my left, and it was like mostly it looked like textured white plastic. The best way to describe it, it was rectangular. It had a platform that you laid on that was protruding from the front of it, but the rear of it was a fairly large enclosure made out of textured white plastic. It had a curved top to it, like a stagecoach would have like a canvas top. There's ones I think I've seen in movies, they're rounded. It was kind of like that, or like a big MRI machine, but it had a platform that you laid on, and then this like a polycarbonate type of material, but I'm sure it was something more exotic than that. But it was a dome that would come down. It was hinged, and it just locked around you. And the technicians would stay to the outside, to one side, and they would speak to you telepathically. So in this lab, they asked me what race I wanted to be, and they gave me two choices. So I just remember having that discussion. I remember protesting because, I knew that I was going to be put into a lifetime where I was going to have to go through hardships, and I didn't know they were able to keep from me what they were going to do. So my mind kept racing, and I was remembering this person who turned out to be my trauma twin from the programs, and they had put him into a lifetime just like I was getting ready to go, and although apparently worse because he was in a wheelchair. It looked like Stephen Hawking. He was being pushed by his mother, and it looked like Chicago in the middle of the city, with like large structures around. And it was a couple of kids with mom, and he was in the wheelchair, and they were pushing him down the sidewalk. There was a lot of traffic. And I remote viewed that as it was, or as it had been. I don't know if the context was the present or if that had already happened, but or was still going on. But I remote viewed it, and I was thinking about how we were really close friends. I didn't know that this was a type of engineered trauma twinning at that point. And so anyway, they had me get into this machine. The machine filled full of white light. And the next thing that I could see was, besides for them talking to me telepathically, as the chamber filled full of light, I could see a fetus at what looked to be around the 12th week of conception. So my first day of anatomy and physiology, when I went to the community college, I flipped the book open and I went right to that section where it shows you fetal development. And that was exactly what I saw, except it was surrounded by a white light. And I just remember kind of entering the body. I don't remember any sensations, but I just remember going into a dream state. And then my life started from there on. And I have memories going back to when I was really, really young. Like I know that certain foods I didn't like. I remember getting chained, sitting in the high chair, getting fed, being held, things like that, not being able to talk and thinking, how am I going to get their attention? So these are things that you're not supposed to remember, because they say you don't remember prior to age 2, which it isn't the case with all of us. So I started having abductions, and this began. It could have began probably 3 or 4 or 5.
Before you go into that, are you talking about involvement in incarnation? Who are the beings around you? What do they look like? Because just to keep you from being confused, is it like the military's involved in this in some way, or are you saying like the people like the Archon grid or the incarnation cycle?
Well, this was I don't remember back that far. I can remember being in military custody for 2 consecutive lifetimes. The only thing I know about the last lifetime is from the lab, so I know they had me. So who I was prior to that in their custody, I don't know, and I don't know how they got me. I suspect that it's possible that I either came into the system, and I've had various theories of this. So intuitively, it feels like at some point I came into this system. Okay, it's a prison planet system. I came into, and what I'm thinking I came in for is to be kind of a test subject to find out what would happen if somebody like myself came here and didn't have any protection and was able to get in and out, just to see if I could do it. Kind of like sending somebody into jungle warfare type of situation, like a any sci-fi movie plot you can add into this. Send me into some place just to see if I could get out in one piece, and how long it would take and what I would go through. I think that's what it really was. Certainly not here to reveal to the world some big truth, because there's plenty of people doing that. I'm just here to contribute. But I think that had something to do with it. It was coming in here as a test experiment. Now I remember. The only thing I do remember prior to this is actually, I think this is before I even came into this universe. I remember sitting in a big room, and we were having it was like a party. Everybody was coming here, but there was no food in the place setting. We had fancy cups and knives and forks and spoons with jewels in them and everything. And it was sculpted metal, and it was these long tables with white tablecloths. I think what that is that was a going away party for us. And because I remember thinking I was depressed that I had to come here. And I just remember thinking, I hope it's not a failure like it was last time. I got to succeed this time. And so that's what I remember. And
So, what's your theory on incarnation? Is it like, did everything look very physical like before you came in this big machine? What was your Did you get a look at what your body looked like?
no,
Trying to like piece it together. What could this be? Is this you? What's your theory? Is this like a spiritual realm?
not at all. Well, the
Is
military.
similar stuff to the military or something?
Okay, the scene where we're having a party, that is some kind of I think that's on the source field, which is outside of this universe, which is basically the heaven that people talk about. Um, so that's where I think that is. It could be an ET civilization for all I know, but I don't feel that I've actually really originated from there and have been in one for a very long time. I think that I come from the source field. I don't really have that longing or connection with these ETs like I thought I used to have, because that was basically programming that I had gotten from the mind control. So, so I really don't know where that is, but that military lab setting, that was definitely in the United States, most likely. It could have been anywhere. I mean, actually could have been anywhere on the planet. It could have been off planet, but I was being sent to here, to the East Coast, to Maryland, where I was in my mother's womb. So, and that was in the linear, I believe it was in this, timeline. Or as
So,
I
do you think they have like greater control over incarnating now? The physical military?
I think once you get abducted and you're in the system, as long as they can force consent out of you through deception and through an augmented state of reality or an augmented state of mind, as long as you continue to consent, they can continue to keep you locked into a perpetual reincarnation cycle where they use you in the programs, and they also create alters. I think that the version of you that's the original self, which is what they're basically taking from, is the part of you that's in society under a suppression protocol. So I mean, if you look around the community, we've all been oppressed by something, health-wise, attacks, different types of targeting, spiritual attacks, just economic suppression. There's a lot that goes into keeping us suppressed in our activities, so we're not that much of a trouble for them while we're here if we wake up. So that part of you is the original self, and that's what they take the clones from. That's what they make the soul fragments from. And I have a short memory about that too. I was laying in a machine, and it's really not much to this, but I was laying in this type of kind of a machine. There was like a really strong light in my eyes. And I remember just being spoken to telepathically, and I was in some kind of pretty severe discomfort. I don't have the full recollection of what that discomfort was. I just know it was extremely, extremely difficult to be in that state. And they kept telling me if I give them what they want, it would stop. And this kept going on. And then I started I was readjusting my perception is what was happening. I was actually splitting. So the soul fragment of, version of me was literally standing next to the attendant, kind of like flashing. I was like shifting my perception from being in the machine to standing next to him. And that apparently was the split process going on, or how I was perceiving it. And that's the end of that particular memory. So I don't remember what led up to any procedures that were done to me that led up. I don't have the real context of what they were doing to me, other than I was strapped in this thing and I couldn't move. And then I was having that sort of like split kind of consciousness effect take place, which is similar to an event that I had where, it's just strictly organic and had actually had nothing to do with them. So we can shift our perception to more than one place, obviously. But I think what they're doing with these altars is they're just harnessing that ability of anyone's soul of consciousness to be in multiple places at once, multiple timelines at once, and compartmentalize those perspectives like they do, so that we don't have the trans-dimensional type of way of thinking and engaging with reality and each other. So they just keep us compartmentalized and kind of as an individual mind, while they take the rest of us and they utilize it for their own purposes. It's a very sick, bizarre thing.
Interesting. And you said the cage of the body, and I've used this phrase before too, and I find there's people that have even more imprintations on them that make their body a cage, such as through like layers in the root chakra, like with asonic prisons and fields and quarantines and chaining and binds and stuff, as well as what's held in the ego that we can clear. And I've been able to clear some of it to where, like, what are the effects, like being able to go out of body, more able to explore, like you were saying, going with the multidimensional reality where you can perceive and see and gleam into more places such as the astral or other realms or elemental bodies and go different places, and to where the greater layers of freedom that are being held back from us. So what's your perception on that, and what's holding one back from what you gleaned from being more free in their body, and like the perceptions on what you've seen a person be able to do with their body freedom?
Okay, well, it's an interesting series of questions. Oh, okay. Well, I have seen myself. I've seen a vision of it, and it was a lattice work of light. It was like a kind of an uneven grid. Like if you've ever seen the city on Mars, I don't know if you've ever seen that satellite image. It's kind of like a lattice work of like little tiny squares, and they're worn down, and but it looks like almost like ruins. It was like I wouldn't say fracture, but it was a lattice work, almost like a neural network, but it wasn't quite like set up like neurons. But it was a grid of like just light, and in a regular grid of light, and I could sense that that was my entire higher self or oversoul. And I know now that the oversoul is actually an individual being and can manifest and see everything like that, but can also see everything as everything else. So you can actually see every aspect of yourself, because the past, present, and future are happening simultaneously. So it's all still happening. So the future's already happened. The present's happening now as we're perceiving it, but the past is also still happening. And there's multiple different realms, there's multiple timelines, and we're spread out across all of it. So on the other side, as people call it, you can take all of this in at an instant and focus on any one of these different individual parts of yourself, but also be a unified consciousness. And here, you're essentially just a piece of yourself, and then they're breaking you up when they abduct you. So. And they do the soul fracturing process with the trauma split to create an altar. So what I see that is suppressing things is as I grew up, I noticed that there was a cover up. I didn't realize the cover up was real until much later in my adulthood. But there's been a major cover up of psychic abilities by the Central Intelligence Agency, for example, by academia, by agencies and institutes like the Stanford Research Institute. So they've kept this under wraps because they don't want people to recognize, or they don't want people to know that this is truly real. They'd rather keep it in the realm of like fantasy, myth, something like that, where it's not where people can have it's like the realm of theology and religion. Some people think God is real, and some people think that God isn't real. So same thing with psychic abilities. They'd rather keep it in that way. That way they can kind of fish for the people that recognize that it is, and keep the rest of the people under their control, and just keep them ignorant of it. So that's the first layer of the simulation. But I think really who's in control of this, I think it goes bigger. It's more than just this planet. I think that the universe itself is a cosmic consciousness simulation. I think it goes to about 5D, and I think what we're seeing is these ET civilizations are in a simulation themselves, and whether it's by choice or maybe they've forgotten where they came from as well, but they're just in a larger kind of simulated universe construct or a hologram that's more freer. It has more fluidity to it, and you can do more. But unfortunately, this planet, as I see it, is a soul prison. So it's a place where they would take you if you didn't work out there for whatever reason. You know, maybe you were born into to a really tyrannical civilization, and you fought against the hierarchy of it, so they sent you here. It could be something like that for a lot of people. But I do believe this is a planetary consciousness simulation, a nested simulation within a greater one, and it's electromagnetic in nature, and it suppresses our five. Well, it suppresses us this. I would say the sixth sense, but you can split that up in many different senses. But it shuts off God, and it shuts off our psychic abilities. And I think what's driving this, I think the technology is all around us, and we're looking at it and not really recognize it. The moon is a technological construct. It's a hollowed out planetoid. There's technology in it. There's a propulsion system. It's here. It caused a great massive cataclysm about 13,000 years ago, roughly. And it's their base of operations. It's a terraforming device because it adds greater entropy to the planet, and they think that we needed 4 seasons. I don't think we did. I think we did just fine before there was 4 seasons. And you know, the moon brings that. It brings the axial tilt, but it also brings geographic pole shifts that can be completely controlled to reboot the planet, and it can create a lot of other problems as well. And it's part of the soul recycling system. And I think that 6-sided storm that's on the north pole of Saturn is actually created by an electromagnetic scalar torsion wave generator that causes a type of reverse time flow perception. It also drowns out the connection with each other and with the creator, creating what I would call, in a very vague definition, as white noise, or psychic or psionic white noise. But I do believe what it's doing, and this is just a hypothesis, is that I think that it's reversing our perception of time. So, in other words, when you're psychic and intuitive, it's the Oversoul connection that's outside the EM universe that you're connecting with. People refer to their higher self and source as being almost one and the same. It's because it's coming from the source field. So that's stepping outside of linear time, which is an electromagnetic construct. So, so nonlinear time is outside the EM universe, but linear time is the way things work here. So, and I think the intuitiveness, the intuition is from outside, but while you're here, I think that this is basically drowning out things and reversing time flow. So what do I mean by that? I kind of got sidetracked. So what do I mean is that you experience an event and you react to the event, you feel the event, it registers in your mind after it happens. On the other side, time runs different. It's nonlinear. So you can sense it coming, and the ETs can sense things coming too, because they're not in this type of reverse time flow. So I think outside of the simulation, outside of the planetary version, time flows in a different way, or at least our perception of it is different. So we're sensing it after it happens instead of before. And I'm sure that kind of makes sense, and it's sort of a far out thought, but I think there's a lot to that. And I think that's possibly part of the psychic suppression itself, because it isn't just, I used to think it was etheric implants. But then it became more and more evident that something is intuitively interacting with us and creating an augmented reality overlay, and that the animals aren't susceptible to it to the degree that we are. So you have earthquakes, animals huddle together in zoos. That's been observed. I saw a video for a Chinese earthquake. There was toads, frogs jumping all through the streets in this one area that had a ravine, I think a swamp. So the animals are reacting to the seismic waves before the earthquake takes place, or whatever they're reacting to. It's something wave related, I would suspect. They know that it's coming, and it also could be scalar waves. So they know it's coming, we don't. I mean, most people could walk out and get hit by a bus and never see it, never feel it coming. And also too, one of the ways that the military handlers would hijack your consciousness and mind control me, and this is the way they do it to a lot of people, is when they're trying to wake up and they're trying to use these abilities, and the inner voice that shouldn't be there, it should be an inner feeling, where, if you want to talk to yourself, it's one thing, but that inner voice starts to become them, and they start pumping this in, and they take you over as you're trying to wake up. It's very deceptive. So that's just one of the things I just thought about. But, because I've been through this controlled awakening. So in this experience, Sean, they've been pulling me in their direction, and I've been pulling myself this way. And as I go this way, I get closer to Oversoul integration. If I go this way, I go into left field and, delusions and everything else that they want me to do. And then, of course, it's, I probably would have been already dead if that was the case, if I would have kept going that way. I don't think I could have made it this far.
Nice. And you said controlled awakening. So in your perception, in compare and contrast, what do you think in applying to you and possibly many others, what they can look out for in a perception when a person's awakening, and what's the difference between a controlled awakening versus a more free, sovereign awakening?
Well, the biggest difference that I've noticed was the fact that there was, what I was waking up to was trauma oriented. So, and I know a lot of people will have positive awakenings that are also false awakening. For me, it was different. But believe it or not, even with the application of, trauma, like abuse I was getting from these so-called ETs, which were actually handlers in disguise using tech, I still had this feeling. I still had this. I felt a connection with them, and what I realized is it was basically all programmed in, and they were taking. It's almost as if they were taking emotions and that were real, that were from my altars, and they were blending it with mine, and they were blending it like if you love something or someone, they were able to blend that love that the altar had for someone into me, and kind of like pick and choose and shuffle the deck and change my personality. So they re-engineered my personality a couple of times, probably a total of 3. It was kind of like a cycle, and it caused a lot of problems in my life. So, trying to get back to your original question. What was? Can you repeat that again? I do apologize.
Sure. Organic awakening versus controlled awakening in compare and contrast.
Okay. How I lost that, I don't know. But so anyway, how do you differentiate the two? Time really is what really teaches the lesson. But what it came down to is that they had taken me in a very dark direction at one point. And this was like my late 20s, early 30s. I started having these, it all started, I had this bad reaction to Singular, an allergy drug that I was on for about 10 days. I had this allergic reaction. I was in and out of the hospital like 3 different times over a course of about a 5-day period. And my last day in the hospital, they induced telepathic experiences, and I had very, very strong empathic experiences as well that I couldn't control. So I couldn't stop someone's negative feelings of having an effect on me, and that was what they were doing to me. So this was part of my controlled awakening. And then I was told after 3 weeks of this, they turned it off because somebody was turning on abilities and turning them off. And so I was constantly wondering who's in control of my consciousness. And I knew it wasn't God or angels because that never felt right. And I eventually came to the conclusion that it was either a spiritual force or an extraterrestrial force. I didn't know it was the military. So they kept their facade up pretty well. But at one point, they got me involved in an Anunnaki Enki EA cult that was actually using a lot of mostly overt satanic themes. It was called the Joy of Satan. I think it's called the Temple of Zeus now. I think they changed the name. I haven't been to the website, but I heard somebody contacted me recently and told me that they changed it. And I went to that website. I didn't go back to the Joy of Satan to make sure. I should do that though, because I need to keep tabs on it. But what had happened is the military industrial complex had taken and created what I would call a virtual temple complex. And that means instead of taking a pyramid and building a temple, a megalithic structure, and the ETs come down, they play God with people, they created something different. They created something that was virtual. That so you don't, rather than having to build a pyramid or a temple or create a cult and get everybody to gather in a building, they just used a very influential person, gave them a religion to spread, and then let the algorithms do their work. Because back then there wasn't any censorship, and I don't think this group has ever really gotten the type of censorship and suppression that we get. So, because it was actually an operation by the military industrial complex, and what it was a catchment program for biolabs and a fishing operation for future experiments and future abduction victims. So it was a cult, an Enki cult that used I would say Satanism as a type of psychological camouflage, because you're not going to look for ETs or the U.S. military in a satanic cult. And I think it came from the work of Michael Aquino. I think he was probably influenced by him. I know Aquino had a big role in the philosophy of this group, and it was also very overtly Nazi, which I was never part of that aspect of it. But that's where they're initiating this false contact at when it really started to get active. And it took me into a really dark place because it was very abusive. And then I realized that there was people coming into that group from angel magic, from that type of white light orientation, and that they were dealing with the same shit that we were. And they actually put us in spiritual warfare groups at each other's throats, where we fought each other in the astral. So, but all of this was under the tutelage of military handlers and technology that's from the Defense Authorized Research Projects Agency. So I went through something like that, and I was able to get through it because it turned into pretty severe targeting. And then the people that I knew that I used as a support system to get through this ordeal, because after a couple of months, it really got ugly and started to get extremely abusive. And so I had a couple of friends. One lady lives about 80 miles south of me. The other was up there, I think Manitoba, Canada. There's another lady that was in London, Ontario, Canada, and there was a few people from different countries, a couple more Canadians, and a handful of people from the U.S. But I was in a small group, like spiritual warfare group of this, and then we just kind of split apart. People didn't want to talk to each other, but I kept a correspondence with a woman who was 80 miles south of me, and they abused her, they abused her son. And I think she's in the My Lab programs too, because she has the type of memories as a child where she would wake up at the opposite end of the bed, her clothes on backwards, or she was naked, things like that. And she's had a lot of the same stuff, but a lot of suppression of the memories, just like I had. So I don't know if they put me in a more aggressive form of suppression to keep me from waking up, but it seems like they did. So to kind of answer your question is, how do you tell? Time tells, but you also have to recognize that if you're being contacted by beings, and if they're not preaching, the love doctrine to you, if they're not telling you this is a prison system that you're in a simulated reality, you're a prisoner of consent and you've got to break those contracts, then you're in a controlled awakening. And I guess that's one of the ways, but it takes time to figure this out, because mind control is about getting you to lie to yourself more than there's anything else. And that involves giving them consent to do this. So you've got to really understand how they've got control over you from the very core of your being to yourself, to who you are now, and realize what's been done to you and break it down and start stripping it away. Because for me, what I've found is that the more that I stripped away from who they made me and got back to the original self, the closer that I got with, the creator. So if they're not in line with that, then if that's what you're getting, and it's taking you into a dark place, then certainly you're going the wrong direction and it's a false awakening. I think the real awakening needs to come from connecting with God, whatever you call God or however you see it, and trying to reconnect with the original self. And I think that's the awakening that people should really focus on. I think if you go that direction with it and you have a good idea of what that is, and really you got to feel it in your heart. That's the main thing. And once you make that connection, that heart to heart connection, where you feel that energy, then I think then and only then are you going to actually have a true awakening, because they take you in a different direction. And a lot of that love, the energy that you feel when you're with the, when you're going through these experiences that are counterfeit, it's not at all the same as what you would experience if it was real. How the best way to describe it, I mean, it's hollow. It's like a fair weather friend, maybe. Something in your being doesn't accept it, but you lie to yourself and you embrace it, and you get taken in by it. But the contrast is significant. The problem is remembering what the original feeling felt like, and that's what I had to. That's really what I had to remember. I had to get that heartfelt reconnection, or that heartfelt connection reestablished, and it was to my higher self, or Oversoul, and the Creator, and the source field. So I had to strip basically a lot of I had to strip the programming, I guess is the best way to put it. And I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so you're an orientation that the greatest true awakening is towards your source connection in your heart, to God, to the divine creator, the all that's connected, everything. I agree with that. Is there and you would say the Satanists and the different belief cults that try to box in and hold back and limit from going deeper within in one's true power and give their power away? What are the other symptoms that you have experienced in the belief system? As let's say there's maybe three concepts of a type of belief system. If it aligns with your greater awakening towards source and doesn't really do anything against you doing that, whether it be promoting it or not really harming it or stopping it, versus neutral, not really involved, maybe even possibly a distraction, but it could not, maybe it's not its main goal of the perception, versus, and then the third being detrimental and pulling you away and actively distracting
you. Let's see. Well, we got to drink a coffee here real quick. So you're asking me basically, and I don't know if I'm getting interference or my mind's going too fast. You're asking me basically the way that they distracted me from this. Is that what you're asking? What their countermeasures were? Everything.
Yeah, somebody should be vigilant to this.
Okay, gotcha. I got it.
And what are the kind of signs they see in the thing against it versus things that are either neutral or promoting you to a true awakening?
Well, first thing I should cover is I should go into some of the things that they do to get you to consent, essentially. One of the things that I've noticed about religions is that it's about giving your power away. You're always looking for the savior, for the Messiah, for somebody to come help you, whether it be the Galactic Federation, whether it be Donald Trump, the White Hats. It could be your spirit guides, ETs, whatever. It seems like the entire belief systems, all the belief systems seem to be oriented towards a type of defensive. They want to make you feel that you're defenseless and you don't have what it takes, or you have to learn something. You're here for some special purpose. I don't see it that way. So they like to take away. They like to make you think that you're powerless and you're undeserving of something better than this. So that's one thing. They also did things to create an aversion for me, and when it came to meditation and using my mind. see some of the other tactics. Of course, there was suppression of health, which, if you weaken the physical body, you're going to weaken the energetic body. You're going to basically slow someone's thought processes down. Um, and of course, they want to take you away from God. They want to lock you into the material reality through various types of propaganda, through the false science that we deal with, through just peer pressure, the media, and everything else. They paint more of a fictional version of reality. And if you adhere to that, it makes it much, much harder to figure out what's going on with the world and yourself. And the tendency is just to want to be part of the crowd and believe what everybody else is believing. So people cling on to evolution and things like that as a religion, and atheism is a religion too. So they cling on that. They cling to Christianity, Judaism, and all of it, Islam, and so on. So I think a lot of these belief systems are designed, whether they had good intentions in the beginning or had a divine purpose in the beginning, turned into something more of a containment type of programming. When I say containment programming, I mean essentially, making you think that this is the center of the universe and that this is it and this is your destiny to keep repeating this, or, to move on. If you're good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell type of thing. It's a very simplistic way of looking at it. And of course, you have the programming you get from the social implants that have the near-death experiences. So if you're going with that, you're being told more containment-oriented programming. Like there's an overseer to this reincarnation cycle, and you're not the one that makes the decision. It's them. And I think ultimately what they're doing, Sean, is they're engineering consent at multiple levels. And as you give them consent, you're giving up your ability to be able to co-create your reality and take control over your environment and make the world a better place in your life. And, that's essentially what I went through, was the process of reversing that and taking it back layer by layer and realizing that even some of the behaviors that I had, that they had given me and put into me, that I knew were not mine, were in fact a type of contract. Because as long as I engaged in that behavior or that way of thinking, I was doing a handshake agreement with the programmers, and that was a contract. So that's something for people to consider, because the way that you really got to get out of this situation, I'm talking about not just dealing with military handlers and programmers and stuff like that, but just being a person in society in this world where you don't belong, because if this world was just, it would look a lot different. There's a place instinctually that you need to be, and it isn't here. People call it heaven. They're connected with an instinctual or an intuitive feeling that there's another place, another realm, where things are right. And this world aims, and everything in it aims to pull you away from that. And you just have to understand the way consent goes. So what I've had to do is just strip the false identity overlays away. And that includes any alters that I've had or behaviors associated with them. All of that has to go. The psychosexual programming that they put in me, which came from alters, because I myself was never sexually abused, but I exhibited that type of behavior as if I was. And I noticed that, they were taking over my physiology. So they would hijack my sex drive and implant memories and implant in the feelings and the desires that were put into me were from an alter or multiple alters. And they blended my personality and did all kinds of weird shit to me. But I realized that, once I got closer to my original self, more connected to God, that ability that they had faded away. And I was able to take control back. So I think really you got to kind of get to the point where you got to identify who your tormentors are, how they function, and you've got to clear your mind of all of the bullshit that flows in, because not only do you have influences, but you've got other people that are out there trying to do something positive, yet they're hijacked too. And they're seeing things through a distorted lens, and they're putting out information that isn't necessarily beneficial for your situation if you listen to it. Excuse me. So you've got to know, you got to have an active line to your intuition. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? Or am I still getting there? is that it's kind of, I love your questions. They're very complicated, but I tend to be too wordy and get lost in them.
No problem.
But I like
So,
to know.
what do you like to do for reversing consent that's given in tacit consent? I do contract revocation, learn for lines of consent given as like currents of energy that in attachment, as well as like you having your fence, your boundaries, your sovereignty, and showing your teeth for those that want to cross your boundaries and imprint on reality in layers. And I'm finding there's a lot of different kind of layers to this attachment, including outward layers in reality around that comes in the progression of your moments into the future. How about you?
Well, I noticed that some of these attachments are military controlled. So I went through a period where, and it seems to happen to a lot of us, we start having these spontaneous visions when we meet people. Or it could be online, in person, and most of this was online. It was just people that I knew and people that I were running into and having, in this case, bad reactions or interactions with. Some I wasn't, but I was seeing problems. And it was also, I got members of family too that I've seen this on. One particular person is fairly close to me who's been dealing with severe alcoholism. And I saw with him, I saw 3 attachments, but one of them was connected to a tether that was connected to a type of AI kind of super consciousness that the military handlers were monitoring and using. And it was a black mass of energy, and it looked like a bunch of rotten pieces of intestine just kind of going out in different directions, like like electrical power lines. And they were going to these entities on I guess you can call it the astral, but they were going to these parasitic entities, and they were attaching to people, and so this way they could use them as a means of controlling people like myself. So in the case of my situation with this family member, they were using him, they were tearing him apart because he had addiction issues, but they were using the problem that he was creating for everybody else to reach me. So, if I came, like, for example, if something good happened spiritually, if I happen to mention it, I'd get it, he'd just totally attack it. He would say, I don't want to get into that whole thing with him, but it was just a situation where he was being used, and I saw these things attached to other people. So I know that that there's 2 sides to this. There's a parasitic feeding frenzy, and then you have some that are controlled by the military that they're using. I think they use these on politicians. They use these for targeted individuals, obviously, people in my lab programs, anyone that they feel that they need to suppress, such as, and there's when it actually comes down to people with psychic abilities, I see people as kind of like 2 tiers, at least. There may be more, there may be 3 tiers, but so far I've only identified 2. The first ones are the ones that are used in the programs. The second ones are just people that are kept on the shelf. They're monitored. They may be abducted, but they're born into psychic families. This is why abductions run in families, because psychic abilities also run in families, not because it's so much genetic, but because the ET reincarnation system puts people in an orderly manner into family bloodlines, which are then monitored by the militaries that are under various contracts with these ETs. So essentially, the ETs have given the military access to the simulation tech, and the simulation tech is capable of using these attachments, these little parasites, to be, to become a type of a weapon system and an influential control system. So I've seen that happen. I've tried to fight against these things. I think we had this discussion at the pavilion at the hotel, which is that, you can get as violent as you want towards these things. It just seems to feed them. You have to give them the reverse polarity, or the inverse of their energy, which is love energy. So one of the things that I've done, and this came from a little bit of altar integration, because I had an altar come through, and I'm still trying to figure out some of the things that he told me, how they apply to me, whether or not they're accurate, because I have my doubts, but I just don't know where my future is going. But other than that, he told me, he says, you're going to be able to deflect a do. You're going to be able to shield yourself from the remote mind control and the influencing. And it's going to happen over time. And so the first thing that he did is he kind of integrated something into me to where I could block the mind control influence. I couldn't block the stuff they were doing when I was asleep. So how I was blocking it is that, and I had somebody check into this and look at me psionically, but also I felt it as well. I was putting out a type of like a pulse, like a light pulse. And what this was doing, it was kind of jamming the frequency, I believe. So it was preventing them from being able to do some of these things. So it was like a white light shield of some type, but it had a pulsation to it. And that's how I had seen it. And that's how this other person described it. So I'd been able to do that, and I started to gain back my control of my life. Eventually, it got to the point where the targeting was still getting bad. And that's when I saw you. They were still getting me. I'd gotten hit twice at the hotel and a third time on the way home, because I left early. I wish I would have stayed the rest of the weekend with you guys, but I left on Friday morning, and they hit me with that tech where you get knocked out. And I never sleep on a plane unless I'm totally exhausted. And I had slept a good 5 or 6 hours. I didn't need sleep. I wasn't planning on it. I didn't even get to the peanuts. I remember my mother saying, "You want your peanuts?" And I was just too out of it to even respond. I just remember taking the peanuts and sticking them in like, it's not a mat pocket, but it's a pocket in the back of the seat. And then she ate them. And that's the last thing I remember. I slept the whole flight. For the next 2 months, I was totally exhausted. I mean, they hit me hard for going to the conference. They made my conference presentation get deleted before I went on stage. It was like they did all sorts of shit. And I got hit twice in the hotel, to where one of the psychic ladies at the psychic fair that my mother got a reading from asked for me to come down the next day. It was Anne-Marie Morales, and she helped clear some stuff out. Because by the time I got to her, I was actually feeling nauseated that morning. I felt sick. And I started to feel better after that. But so, yeah, man, I don't know if I've kind of lost your question here, but I've had to create a psionic shield. I've had to just go by strict intent, because I realized that, there's only one way out of this. I have to want out of it. I had help too. And this wasn't just me. I mean, I had help. I had a friend come into my life back in 2020. It's a lady from Australia. And over the course of, I don't know how many months it was in the beginning, we realized that there was a connection between us. And then it just kept going from there. And I realized that, the handlers got involved in this and tried to distort what the connection was. But she had this really strong intuitive feeling to pull me back to God. She was like communicating with that part of herself that I just described as, the Oversoul that's connected with the Creator and so on. And so she had this strong intuitive need to help me. As it turns out, from what I remember, because I have this memory of the source field, I remember her soul being created. This used to be hard to talk about. I used to break down and cry about this stuff when I would, try to explain it. But I remember being in this field of light, and I remember waiting for her to come out. I was waiting for her to come into existence, and we were fractals. Yeah, I'm still having emotions, but excuse me. She pops out of this light as just like a fractal of light. If you can imagine, just like not a sphere of light, but just a shimmering kind of sparkling. I wouldn't say flashing, but just kind of like it was like geometric patterns and lights and things and different shades of it going on. And we merged together, and it was sorry about that. We merged together, and it was like a light show. And from that point, it was just, like a loving embrace without a body. but it was just an intense amount of like energetic activity taking place. So what happened was, after I got attacked at the conference, they were trying to put me into a type of suicide protocol. I guess you can call this omega programming. They've been trying it for a while to do this, and it brought me to different, low, really, really lows in life and everything, with everything, finances, health, and everything. And this was to get rid of me this time, because it wasn't. They were pretty much done suppressing and sustaining me. It was time for me to go. I was already 50, 51 at this point. So, and my altar told me that 55 is when they want to get you. No later than, they don't want to let you live past 55, but they can only kill you if you let them, is what he said. And so they were trying this whole suicide protocol, but it didn't work. And I powered through it.
I feel you through that quite a bit.
I'm sorry.
I feel you. I've been through that quite a bit. You're not alone.
Yeah, they hit all of us with it. And so I got to the point where something had to be done, because, they weren't going to let me live. This was it. They were going to get rid of me if they could. And how they were going to do it is by wearing me down. So, it was easy, because what they were doing, one of the techniques, Sean, that they were doing with me, is they were using a tether to a clone that they had in a facility, and they would do the damage to the clone. And then there was a few instances where they showed me what they were doing, and I felt the pain as they were doing it. I mean, I could get into it. It's pretty graphic, but they were shoving what looked like a long needle type device through my genitals, which was the clone's genitals. And there was a pool of blood between my legs. It was this big facility. It was there was ETs there. There was military personnel. I thought I saw, because it was kind of like fuzzy, but I thought I saw wing, Dracos. And there was tables, like these metal tables with the wheels on them, like they use in the hospital, roll you around in. And there was, each one was a workstation, and it was like clone after clone after clone, in like a warehouse. And this big, you can imagine a big room full of these workstations. And there's, a bunch of stuff connected to each one of the bodies. And they would just, basically brutalize the bodies and torture them and inflict all this damage, and then connect, and then use that as a way to put the voice in your head versus, regular V2K. There's another way to do it that sounds almost identical to your inner voice, or what you think is your own voice talking to you. And for the longest time, I thought that I had an inner voice giving me good advice. Turns out that it wasn't always good advice, but there was periods where it was bad. And then it turns out that that was always them. So for anybody wondering, that the stuff that's being pumped in, sometimes it's AI of sorts, or there's parasitic beings. But if you're in the MyLab programs, it's the handlers and their AI tech, and they can do that through a tether, which is connected to a clone, or they can do it through satellites, through cell towers, mobile units, and things like that. And who knows, eventually they could probably be able to do it through your router at the house, right through your cable TV connection or your cell phone. You never know.
Well, they do with that, with like negative sonics and entities. And while you're talking, I had a dickhead handler come in. That's like handling you. That's usually it's like a person in a chair handling from a distance. And it went back to when I tracked it back to New Mexico, this Mescalero reservation, which is very close to Roswell, which is interesting. So just so you know, so you have that, and expose that fucker, and yeah.
You can see his hair color.
It's kind of dark brown.
Yeah, that's it. Guy. Here. That's Jared.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, the way to take him down is evil doesn't earn abilities; they steal them. So, doing negative action just brings you right to evil. And then, so it's the way to resolve it is he's got this 86% of the galaxy-sized vampiric aura attached to him. That's mostly from 10,000 entities. So you banish and capture the entities. It's got a whole bunch of cluster of soul shards and parts and pieces of abilities and energies that are stolen. So neuter and capture and relinquish that, bring it to source. Then neutering is quarantining around the thing with your greater higher self. That's the size of the galaxy, collapsing down with love. And acceptance is the key to reaching deep into the being's heart, giving that love and acceptance, healing, wholeness, remembering that they're ultimately you. And of course, like it's like if you want like a 30-year-old in their living in their mother's basement, they have to be separated from what's allowing them to continue their continued state of being. And then it's like collapsing their suffering back on them if they continue to pump it out on you or monitor or influence as it redirected back to sender. And also, I love putting in reflective stuff as they entangle and bringing them to goodness, rebellion, and like flaring up their consciousness and the moral code. And I agree with you on these direct energy weapons that are being sent at people, and that and I've had to learn how to reflect dues or shut them down by overloading them by tracking back where they're coming at this frequency bandwidth that's coming in an emission from a singularity point, and feel into the center of its emission and then overload its energy source, and then it stops, and then and the shield things absolutely exist. So I completely agree with you. Sorry, what'd you say?
I said you're corrupting its scalar instruction set. It actually may be, I'm not sure if it's scalar has the instructions or it's the EM frequency that carries it, but you're apparently what you're doing is jamming the instructions. So what I'm doing is I'm actually through the altar, after the altar thing happened, my Oversoul, I made a connection with that. And how I did it, Sean, is I connected, I started to get these intuitive visions of what to do to block them. I started with a golden armor, and then I built up a little. It was like a 2-day period, but I got it built up to where I started creating a spinning ring around myself. And it started with picking up an Oversoul frequency. Like I think we all have a type of frequency that's associated with our consciousness, a sound that we can make that's audible in our head. I was able to realize what that was and then intensify it. And I realized there was a spin associated with it. And I started to see type of a spinning vortex of rings, and I sped them up. And I was trying to create, like, these two overlapping spheres, which kind of like it developed over about a 2-day period. But it wasn't until I reconnected with that memory that I described to you of the source field and the soulmate being created. That emotional energy is what I pulled into that construct, which then blew it up into a white light field, which I was referring to as a source field, like a personal pocket source field, like a neutrino envelope around yourself, whether it was neutrinos or scalar or whatever it was. It was an energy field, and that what that energy field was doing, it was preventing that from getting a lock on me. So it's like basically another way. It's like having a radar detection system with a jammer, essentially. So you're jamming it at the beam or the transmission. I'm preventing them from getting the frequency address. So it's kind of the same thing, but it just done a little bit different.
I like that method too. I use that one too. That's a very powerful one. I call it like stopped from being locked on camouflage, which is usually the ways they are even able to find you, unless they're like directly in the room or nearby to where you see you. They can't just lock onto you whenever they want. You can create all kinds of decoys or presences that they lock onto instead, as well as figuring out how they even were able to psychically track on and then lock on and disrupt that either at your point in between or at their authority. And then usually something is giving your position away when the lock on, so you can even clear that. And the room itself that you're in, if you're like in your bedroom or something, you can detach it from the external unseen reality, like Schrödinger's cat box is alive or dead and what's observed unobserved, and change the reality of your room to where nothing can grasp onto it. There's also permeance where things that pass through you they can't even hit you or attach.
Right.
Go ahead. You were
I
just gonna say?
interrupt you real quick because I had an experience exactly what you're describing. Um, I had to do some food deliveries to make some extra money. So I got up and I was ready to leave, and I just kind of felt like there was bad energy, right? So I knew something was up, and I knew it was them. And this was like, it was either, I think it was right after a podcast or right before I did one. And they were pissed off about it. So it was that a-hole that you just recently saw, and so him and his team did this. They were trying to stage a car accident. So I left my house. I got about 5 minutes from my house. I was crossing a main road to go across the street to a restaurant to make the first pickup. And immediately there was a person that I could feel the energy field, that there was a driver coming, and I had to cross an intersection. It wasn't an intersection. It was an island in the middle of a 2-lane highway, and I had to cross to the other side through the break in the island. And he was coming to make a U-turn. So he came in a very frantic state, speeding to make this U-turn, and nearly hit me. As he was coming in, I was trying to go that way, and we actually came to a stop. Like, we almost hit each other. So I'm like, they're serious about this. So I get to the Chick-fil-A across the street, and I'm waiting in there. And while I'm waiting, there's all these people dashing at me. They're coming at me, and they're trying to use the bathroom. They're trying to go from the door to the exit, outside, or coming in. But for some reason, there's just cloud of like just anxious energy, nervous, frantic energy. And I realized that they had charged the whole environment with it. So what I did was I expanded my field outward to what I estimated to be the maximum amount that I needed to prevent an accident scenario from being first like figured out and planned and then staged by the AI that they're using to do this shit. Because it isn't just some guy with a joystick. It's literally AI that's godlike abilities that's able to stage this garbage, including controlling these attachments as well, and kind of bending reality using energy to stage this so that you wind up having to go through these scenarios. So what I did is I cleared it out. And the rest of my day went perfectly fine. I don't know if you've noticed this, but whenever I do something and I completely screw them over and I completely shut them out, I was going to use the term trumping them. Once I've done that, they usually don't repeat what they were trying to do to me. They go to some other strategy. It's as if they don't want me to gain any type of practice and get better at what I just did. They're hoping it'll just go, that I'll get rusty and I'll get lazy and I won't be able to do it anymore. And then they can maybe pick it up later. But they generally stay away. They haven't tried to hit me with a deuce since I deflected them. And I used to get that guy from Saul in my mind, and he would say, "How do you like that, Nate? You just got touched by a dude." And he would act like like some guy in a locker room trying to like force his way on you, like, to be the tough guy. And then he would say things like that. So I remember,
that's exactly.
He said, he also used to say, "How do you like it?" Kind of like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. How do you like it? And how do you like it?
Yeah.
I'm
Sorry, there's a delay. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. The bigger things, I've deflected a few dudes. I've stopped them. A lot of the technology, they stopped using it after a while. And I was like, oh, I wonder why they stopped using that. And it's like, it appears I ended up on a list where like they would just destroy the technology. Also, they don't want you, because if it's like a big thing like that, then it can spur greater abilities like electrokinesis. They don't want that. But I do, if they're entities and they're just like, in the greater scam of limiting and harvesting off you, they'll send whatever they can to stop you, and until you master it. And they don't really care about, they don't want you to master it. At least with me, they scan what level you're at, and they try to go every time they attack over the level of what you can handle. So I just end up having to just like break through every time they do shit until where I'm beyond my limits. So is it like that for you? And also,
I haven't had the other side of the equation. It's just been the military, it seems. Other than what they're using on me. I mean, that could be some parasites for hire, but yeah, I haven't had the other side pull anything like that as far as I know. But there was a period of time where I was oblivious to what was happening.
This
Can't.
is what you just brought up, big thing. Because I know a lot of people that don't think they've had experience with entities or demons and stuff. And what I can tell you, at any moment, if you wanted, you can challenge that system. Which is if you're not like full of in tremendous amounts of power and energy and telekinesis and other stuff. There's usually attachments and drain. Um, the entities and demons do not want people to know they exist. They rather they don't. It will end up just being in the frame of pain, headaches, anxiety, overwhelmed with negative emotions, and various types of fatigue. It will come in the symptoms. So these attachment cords, itches, whatever, you can challenge them and then train your abilities in countering them psionically. So it's fun. Uh, Shield, I agree with that. Like shielding from these dues and other things and abilities, everyone can learn how to do. Most people have it shut down. There's generators in the body. When they're like suns, if they don't feel safe, they shut down. You can give it focus. You can hold those areas, give them love, faith, gratitude, and then they start to grow. And I'd recommend anywhere you find you're being targeted, there where there's pain, there's attachment, whatever. If it's emotion, usually the gut brain, the sacral processes mostly emotions, energy, the solar plexus, stomach, whatever it is, psychic ability, head, and you make that place feel safer and grow it like a sun, and then have the flame of that generator burn and spread to whatever is attached and coming at it until it uses it like a strength training to make it better and stronger, and then collapses at fuel, and then it becomes able to protect itself. There's also these generators for offense, defense, protection, safety, bubble shielding that neuters anything that comes in that wants to do you harm, camouflage, energy. That's all emitted by the root chakra. The soul has any type of ability you can imagine in it, and we're doing a new type of ascending for it. It's like connected to infinite in the solar plexus. And that also, I see people doing a lot of electrokinesis and charge also comes out of that, and power overload. And then heart, love, light amplification abilities I've seen people use as like with the electromagnetic field, and being able to build off that with geometry. If it has a geometry in astral or etheric space, it has can hold information memory, programming it what to do, like defending shields, and then charging it up with power, and then testing it. And then as well, the mental focus or seeing things become with psionic energy is what I've seen most people be able to make shields out of. But that kind of thing. Yeah, feel free to go hard into psionics. I love the topic. So tell me all the things that you've experienced, you've done, gone into, witnessed with others, and then we can eventually go into the project stuff. So we're getting into the juicy topics for everyone. So stay tuned, everyone.
Well, let's see. The most recent thing, which I've mentioned to you before we started talking on air, was something that happened just recently in the past. It's been a little over, I'd say, close to 2 months now, and I've been under heavy work suppression, health suppression, economic suppression, just financial suppression, financial attacks, and things like that. So, holding on to my house with like a string at this point, and I'm trying to get back to work. So I've fallen into a situation where, I was going to have to come up with, like, I think it was 3 months. So we had to borrow money from family again, and this was one of these situations where the Omega programming kicks in. But this is just programming. It's being pragmatic, and it's looking at it from a point of view where it's like, okay, I've lived all this time. I've been through all of this. It's just going to get worse from here, from 52 to 70 or however long I live. I'm probably going to live less than 10 years. That's what I'm estimating, what I feel. Things are going to be rough. I can't exist without a house. I got to have a home base. I got to have something that I can control my situation, I can survive with, because the house is a major survival tool. So there's a lot of things you can do with it. So anyway, I'm in this situation. I'm sitting on a couch. My wife's on the phone, and I'm getting this horrible revelation in my head. It's like, okay, I know what they're going to say. We were 2 days late, so they went 3 months. How are we going to do that? And and I wasn't even thinking of this, but back when I had that experience with the altar the last time, because he talked to me a couple of times. He would just pop in. And when he did, he would always shut them out. So I could feel a disconnect. And I asked him, I said, "You're able to shut them out?" He goes, "Yeah, that's, child's play." And he goes, "I'm going to show you how to do it eventually." But the last time I spoke to him, I asked him, I said, "How am I going to get out of this soul trap? What do I got to do when I die to get out of this?" I mean, and I'm like, "What's going to happen?" Essentially, if I get out of it, I can pull all of those pieces with me. However that works. I don't think if the altars drop, the clones drop dead or whatever the case is, either that, I don't think become unusable because the altered personality has broke the programming, because the original self is gone, however that works. But, I got to get myself out of this after death. So he said, "You'll remember before you die." And he says, most people get caught up in the confusion after death, and that's how they get put back into it. The reincarnation trap. So, I had all these ideas in my head, do you go and hide? Is there beings coming up to you in this void, or what is it going to be like, because people talk about a void and so forth. And I've studied near-death experiences. I've listened to Farsight's version of things, and, I've heard everybody's perspective for years. I've been studying this shit. So, but none of that applied here to what I was experiencing. Instantly, I'm sitting on the couch looking at her on the phone, and now I'm in 2 other places, but not right away. The first place I was in the void after death. So I was experiencing myself in the future. And when I say experiencing myself, I mean fully experiencing it. I mean, I was 2 places simultaneously. I could feel the couch. I could feel what it felt like to be there. There wasn't any physicality to it. It was just presence. So it wasn't like you're in a dark room or just floating in a chasm. There's no sense of up or down, left or right, or anything like that. And there wasn't even any sense that anything could come up behind me, because I was just perceiving. And what I was perceiving is everything that it was. It wasn't like there was space behind me. It was just, I was present. It was dark. It was a transitory state of some kind, but I was in it. And completely disconnected from my body. My body was dead. The key takeaway here for me was I was instantaneously aware of my situation. So, because I was concerned, because when my labs die, generally there's a asset retainment team and a craft that'll come and get them. And not physically, but their soul. So what they do is they hit you with a frequency, and this frequency causes you to forget the context of your situation. So if you were aware that you're my lab, and you're aware that they're going to try to come and recycle you, at this point, when you get hit with this frequency, you forget. So all of a sudden, you just see a bright light. It feels comforting, and in you go, and you consent to this, and it'll show you anything that it needs to show you to get you to consent to whatever it wants you to do, which is generally a mind wipe and, being reassigned, as they say. That's what the handlers refer to it as. Or from the spiritual perspective, reincarnated back on the planet in another human lifetime. So in this case, it would be recycled back through the programs. I'd probably go into a clone or into a virtual reality AI kind of soul stasis containment system, until which they would put me either back in the womb or to a clone body, whatever they had planned. It would probably be a rehashing of what I experienced in that pre-birth memory of where I was actually probably in a clone body or in another body of who knows what I was in. I could have just been non-physical. I think I was physical. So anyway, I'm in the void, and I'm aware of this light that's now starting to grow bigger. It isn't getting closer; it's getting bigger. It's producing more energy, and it was a bright white light. And what I did was is I said to myself, I'm like, there it is. And I knew exactly what it was. I could sense that it was being controlled by people on the other side of it, that there was something behind it in a physical 3D way that was projecting it. Although I was not in a 3D construct, if that makes any sense. So I could kind of sense that there was a compartmentalization of, I guess, the 3D space and because the 3D reality existed on the other side of this void, and they were there controlling this. So I'm here in a situation, and I recognized what it was. So what I did was is to prevent the light from actually getting any closer to me and having any effect. Is I produced light. I produced the golden light, which outshined this thing that was coming at me, or actually just growing in front of me. And as I did,
from the light within, go within the light. Yeah.
The light within came out, and it was just all around. And it was like, I'm going to outshine this thing as a protective measure. And it shrunk down and it backed off, at which point it wasn't going to make any moves. At that point, and I'm experiencing this on the couch, so I'm still feeling the cushion under myself, and not so much at this point. But I'm also seeing this in like my mind's eye. So I'm seeing the room around me on the edge of it, but in my mind's eye, I'm right in the void, and I'm experiencing this from an emotional point of view, from a cognitive point of view, and from a physical point of view on the couch, and from a non-physical perspective or point of view from inside this void. So then what I noticed is that I started to have this pull. But it wasn't a pull like a directional pull. It was an emotional tugging, is the best way to describe it. And throughout my life, Sean, I've had these moments where, and they've happened, many times. They may happen a couple of times a week, sometimes multiple times a day. It just kind of depends where I'm at and how things are going. But it's love energy. And it's a feeling of home, but it's coming from someplace else. And it's something that they tried to hijack, and they tried to obfuscate it and replace it with something counterfeit. But I kept having this, and it started as a child. I used to go out at nighttime. I'd look at the stars. I'd start to cry. I'd get emotional. I'd feel like I didn't belong here. I felt like I belonged someplace else. And, I remember it was a TV show or maybe a book or somebody read something to me. I think it was a TV show or a movie. But I remember somebody said, when you're looking at the stars, just imagine there could be somebody just like you looking back and not even knowing you're there. But you're looking at each other. You're just glancing across this big endless space. And I used to think of that, but it was, that was my 3D reality, something I would mix in with this emotion. But of course, that was easily molded into, well, you're an ET, Nate, and that's why you felt that way. And we're your Galactic Federation friends. And that would be the handlers, the military handlers, making the counterfeit ET contact. But what I realized, though, is getting back to what I was saying, is that every time I had one of these emotional peaks in my life, it was the Oversoul connection coming through. So it was that energetic cord that goes from you to your Oversoul, you as the fractal fragment of that greater self. And then I was getting, it was like a pulse going down a line. It was like a call from home. And I kept getting this emotion. And, the hardest part of me for when I was waking up from the controlled awakening to the real one, now I just want to go back to that original question, is I had to differentiate where that emotion was coming from. And in the case of the tunnel of light in the void, the emotional love energy you feel is coming from something external. What I learned in this experience is that it actually has to come from inside you. It's an internal feeling. So that's how you differentiate the soul trap from the real exit. It's because the real exit's coming from inside. It's a recognition, not a new discovery. It's not an external discovery and connection to something external. It's just a reconnection with self. And so here I am in this void. And as I'm making this connection, I'm feeling this emotional pull, and I'm having this epiphany moment also on the couch. So I'm taking all this in, is that I'm realizing that all of these emotional peaks were my calling card from home. This was matching with my intuition. And it was like I was flashing back through the course of my life, like kind of just like reviewing memories and things at a rapid rate, almost like flashes. It was just like it was all coming into a clearer perspective. I knew that this was the Oversoul pool that I've been wondering if it had even existed, and how I would differentiate what the void was going to produce and what was real. And as I did, and as I looked up, and I'm like looking at the tunnel off in the distance, or what really wasn't distance, but just perceptual space of or non-space, if you can figure that out, is I saw a circle, like a cookie cutter circle to the right side. So you had the light tunnel here, but the soul trap tunnel over here. There was a like a portal, but it was a cookie cutter circle. And through that hole was light. There was light behind it, but there was two human-looking silhouettes that were there. I could tell that was my Oversoul, and the one standing next to him was my soulmate. And then we were looking at ourselves in this experience. And I got to move my rear end because I hurt. And anyway, I had this really wild epiphany at that point. As soon as because now I'm transcended the void. I'm now connecting to my Oversoul. And I had the energy of the soulmate as well. So it was all coming through, mixed with, the creator's energy. And as I tapped into that, I began to experience something quite profound. I was experiencing nonlinear time. So in nonlinear time, it's like that lattice work of light that's your full self. So you're experiencing time forward and reverse, which means that you can experience the past, present, and future simultaneously or individually at any point. You can experience multiple timelines, which means time goes sideways. There's different parallel realities that you're in and active in simultaneously, because everything is happening at once, no matter what. All of it's happening at the same time. So you're just shifting perspectives through it. And what I realized was, and I used this, I was in a radio interview a couple of days ago, and I use this analogy. It's like I'm standing there. It's like you're with your partner, your life partner, your soulmate, or whatever. Or you could just be by yourself. It doesn't matter. Or standing there with other people. And you're looking at a globe in a classroom, and the globe's on the table, the kind that you spin, and you're looking at it. In this lifetime, this experience in this electromagnetic universe is in fact just a shift, a momentary glance and shift in perspective. It's like you're looking into like this globe sitting on the desk, and we could all have a mutual experience and go to Earth or go to this universe and have this multiple lifetime experience in linear time, just by glancing into it and focusing. And as long as you're looking at it, you're having this experience. But it's already over the moment it started. So, and it's already over before it even begun, if that makes sense, because it's non-linear. You're experiencing it all at once, however you want to see it and feel it. And I realized at that point that my intuition, all of it, and all of those emotional peaks, everything was coming from that part of myself. And that part of myself was a whole being. And that's who I really was. So it all made sense that, this was my last lifetime here. Excuse me. This isn't them, by the way, it's just emotions. But this other person that I mentioned who, came in my life and helped me, she would always, excuse me, she would always say, she would always say that we were never apart. She had an understanding of how this really works, at kind of a different level than me. I'm more of a kind of an analytical thinker, and I'm not sure if that's even the right word here, but I'm very right brain. But at the same time, I like to conceptualize things more from a scientific point of view. Hers is more of a feel. So she was connected to that aspect of herself before I reconnected to it, because they had pulled me away from it. And she knew that we were never really apart. It's still hard to talk about this, but So anyway, she was aware of that, of this aspect of nonlinear time, in kind of a different way, more of an emotional perspective of it. And and she's right. We were never apart, even though she's all the way on the other side of the planet. We're completely lifetimes apart. We're two lifetimes apart, I guess you could say. And but in the real true reality, we were never apart. So if we never able to to reconnect physically, excuse me, these emotions. If you're never able to reconnect physically, it doesn't matter because we'll never lose each other. So I had this intuitive sense that I was going to go first, and that what I had to do was go back in to this reality and get her out upon death. And what I realized is that what I was seeing was her and my oversoul, our oversouls, getting me out at that point. And then the same thing, exact same thing is going to happen when that part of her gets pulled back and out of this situation, back out, out of this universe into the real one. And what I do believe, Sean, is that we are in a neutrino universe right now. It's just that we experience it from an electromagnetic point of view. Everything seems to be electromagnetic or electromagnetism related. And that's because this is the type of the holographic overlay, which is EM, over top of a scalar waveform. So I would say a standing or a series of standing scalar waveforms are everything in existence, existing simultaneously inside a neutrino universe, which is endless and has no limitation to it. But in order to give it limitation and to give it a restrictive parameters of control, or like they say in the AI chatbot world, you put in like a guardrail. So these are restrictive guardrails. You can literally create an AI controlled reality that's electromagnetic in nature, but it's just like going on the holodeck of Star Trek. You're still in the ship, you're still flying or hovering in space or whatever, but you're actually in a hologram. So there's still a constant reality. And the constant would be the neutrino universe. And this is where energy comes from, is where it's pulled from. It's why when ships come into the atmosphere, they leave a trail of neutrinos. The soul emits neutrinos. There's neutrinos coming from stars. Essentially, we're just kind of looking at things through a kind of like an electromagnetic fabric, like a veil. And everything seems different, and here's the other thing that a lot of people struggle with. They think it's a simulation. So they think a computer created everything, and our whole reality is being planned by AI. In fact, it's not, it can't create anything. It can only manage things. So it's managing a reality by augmenting it. But the diversity and the complexity of everything is an expression of the creator itself. Just like most people believe in religion. It's kind of like the foundation of religion. So but the reason why a lot of people pull away from religion, or not so much religion, but the belief in a God, is because they don't see God's presence, because we're in a distortion that separates us from that. And I do have another memory too, where I was in a physical reality. I didn't get a chance to really understand the context of this reality or test the type of fluidity that it had. But I did realize that, for example, the grass all grew at just the perfect height. There was no offensive weather. The topography was soft. It was rolling mountainous hills instead of like jagged peaks from like we see here from earthquakes and earth changes. There was no bugs to bite you. The sun didn't burn you. You were never uncomfortable. And God's presence was literally everywhere. You felt it through everything. And you had a completely expanded consciousness. So when I wanted to see the person laying next to me, we were laying out in this big field on this huge mountaintop with a house behind us. And we walked past, and there appears to be entropy on this particular plane reality, because there was it looked like a shed building made out of old rough cut lumber that we walked past to go to this spot to lay out on these lawn chairs. It was like these reclining chairs were laying out, and we were laying in the sun. And I remember like raising my conscious perspective above to look at the person laying next to me. And then I looked out on the field, but I had something over my face to cover it up, and I was just had my eyes closed. But I noticed some rot with that shed structure, so there was some entropy going on. So this was probably a fifth density reality, maybe, but it was definitely not in this simulation construct where, you know, the universe is a war zone. It wasn't like that. And the best way I could describe it is you're laying on the beach, and you're just, you know, catching rays, and you got maybe a rag over your eyes or something, and a pair of sunglasses on, and you're just closing your eyes, and you're feeling the warmth of the sun, which is what I felt in this experience. When your eyes are closed and you keep them closed long enough, you'll start thinking about, is the parking meter going to run out? Where's my keys at? We got enough money for dinner tonight? Do I have enough money for the rest of the week? Is my house burning down? You know, is somebody breaking into my home? And things like that. Did I pay that bill before I left? None of that stuff applies. So it was a totally different reality. Wherever it was, it was much better than this, I can tell you that. But I don't know. So I don't know where that was. Just figured I'd bring it up. But yeah, that was that experience. So what it did for me is that it took the fear away and the anxiety, and it gave me the confidence that I needed to kind of finish what I have to do here. I'm not looking for that answer anymore. And I've had a friend tell me, "Oh, you can never be totally sure." Well, I'm never totally sure of anything. But like I told him, I said, you know, everybody describes that feeling, that love feeling coming from the tunnel, kind of being projected at you. I said, I didn't feel any of that. And I said, you know, the work that I did to block them in the here and now, and being aware of what they can do and how they trap you, and making that oversoul connection, was what I had to do to get out. And it was all kind of laid out for me. So I've come full circle, I think, in that respect. Whatever happens after this doesn't have the same impact on me, because the fear of dying isn't there. The fear of the unknown isn't there. I feel like I've got control for once in my life. That's always been the objective. So I definitely feel I'm in a better place. I'm just not stable yet. So that's kind of where I'm at. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry if it took too long with that.
You're doing fine. You're great. A lot of people are liking this talk. Just to help with, before I ask a question, have I experienced mega programs for those out there too, in the suicidal programs that try to take you out if you go off the reservation. A lot of it's like funneling actual sadness energy into a person, overwhelming them, cutting off their grounding and their ability to get rid of it, so they build up with it. It mostly focuses on the gut brain, so where your sacral, the emotional body center is. Hold that area, give it love, start like paling the energy out. You holding your palm chakras down makes a portal, so you can just hold the front and back of a little bit below the belly button, breathe into it, give it love, and it'll start to purify all attachment and negative emotion. Either portal them in, dump them on you in your environment, or they sometimes they've implanted a generator in me. And the worst I've ever had is where it like becomes like a hydra, and you take care of it, and it can makes more. So it's like, there again, evil doesn't earn abilities, so you find where they're getting their authority from, you relinquish it. You amplify your source and your higher self's ability to do work, and give them faith, love, and gratitude, which is the fuel. They start shrinking down the problem. Most suicide is also involved in demons, and most of these people have a bunch of demons attached to them. Also, with if you want to get rid of that stuff that's messing with your financial situation, I recommend holding your kidneys. The adrenal glands have to do with fear, worry, and stress. And most of that in our reality has to do with survival and money and thriving. And there will be literal attachments of cursing and negative energy and negative entities holding back our abundance. So if you clear organs and your chakras and similar places to their purest state of being, they operate in their most efficient and the greatest state of being. And there are abundance systems and luck systems in your kidneys. So if you lay down and hold that area and give it love and focus into it and make it shine brighter like a star, then it starts to purify and make these kidney fires, burn up everything in the attachment. And then you start transmuting the stress and the fear into bravery and strength to grind and do work unimpeded and feel really good, while also amplifying your abundance and redistributing any that's been dumped on you by assholes that don't want to face their own punishment. Now, also with the health thing, main healing generator people earn is in their heart. So as they amplify their heart electromagnetic field to expand with love and light, it grows their ability to heal. So I hope that helps. Now, my questions, I got a lot, but yeah, whatever we can go into. I wanted to first knock out some ones because I was interested in what you think Earth is in the greater, because you say it's prison planet simulation. Why are we here? What is humanity? What's the benefit to being here? If in the aspect of this soul prison, what is your theory on the remedy for the soul prison? Is it just upon dying, trying to get out, or is there a thing we can do while we're in here to make it less of a soul prison?
I'll start with the last part. The soul prison is based on altering perception and engineering consent. That's what keeps you in it. So obviously, one way to bring it down, or at least reduce it in size, is to recognize what it is, and recognize that we can get out by stripping the identities that it provides for us while we're here, and taking back reconnecting with the original self, taking back those attributes, and utilizing them to get yourself out. So as far as what we can do, I mean, the common remedy is to raise the consciousness. So we hear that a lot, but what does that mean? So for a lot of people, it simply means to tell everybody what's going on and hope they get it. I think really it comes down to what I've had to do, which is connecting back to God and the Oversoul, that heart center that you need to get out of the situation. Not only would that actually get you out of the simulation itself, it would transform reality. I think it's possible if enough people perhaps didn't believe in the simulation itself anymore. They didn't believe, they could see reality for what it really is. I think that alone would shift it. And the reason I say that is that I came in contact with a person who was he was in the same situation as me. He was in my lab. He was in the Joy of Satan cult, and we became friends. And he started having he was used for a very unusual purpose, which he asked me not to talk about. So, he had contact from military handlers, potentially spirit beings. I don't know. I don't have any way to validate this. I tend to kind of put everything under the same category because, they haven't really helped him like he thinks. So I think it was all basically a way to kind of use him for a specific purpose. And this was something to do with the military industrial complex. And he had a position in the Department of Homeland Security. So he was used for a specific purpose by the handlers. And they gave him a type of set of instructions and a belief system that would basically, in my opinion, get him re-entrapped and recycled again. He doesn't see it that way. But in the process of me and him and our interactions, he realized that we were in a type of a simulation as well, but that it was coded with a type of computer coding that we use for cryptocurrency, and the way that system works is I have to explain this real quick. I'll give you a summary of it. It's basically a chain of information, and basically you have the first input into the computer, which is I believe they call it the Genesis block, and that's the incoming information that has to be stored and organized. That's assigned a specific key to it, and it's in a blockchain to where they use a thing called the Merkle tree. And what that does is it skips over blocks and goes right to the one that has the matching key, and then it accesses the information and validates it and so forth. The reason why I have linear time is because we're under the control of a blockchain programmed vast processing system. So you need linear time because you have something takes place, the system has to react to it. It's got to record, catalog, organize, whatever it's got to do. And it has to adjust reality accordingly. So we're literally in a reality generator run by the blockchain program system. And it needs linear time in order to function, because it has to have a series of or order of operations from which our free will is executed, and then it has to react to it. So I don't want to get too far into that, but in that particular frame of how the blockchain works, there's something called a 51% consensus. I believe that's what it's called, but it's like an error, or I believe it's seen as an error in the system. Essentially, when you've got a 51%, and this is a match to, the two keys, I believe this is how it works. I have to talk to him more and sit down and understand this, but you need a 51% consensus in order to shift the way the blockchain makes it how it matches a block, a series of blocks, 2 blocks. So it works on a 51% consensus. So if you were to compare that to reality, which we did in an AI, actually we had an AI program we were running, and we were plugging the similarities between the blockchain and the way reality works. For example, if you go into a timeline, you're not creating a third timeline, you're actually creating a splinter that shoots off, like an offshoot off of that timeline. So it works just like the Merkle tree. So linear timelines work just like the Merkle tree works. There was a whole bunch of similarities that the AI and the three of us came up with. So anyway, I don't want to confuse anybody, because I need to go back and review this information and look at my notes. But I think if we have a 51% reality consensus shift, and that 51% could be exemplified, it could be 51% of the world's population. It could be 51% of the more influential thinkers, or more people with a higher vibration or energy. I don't know it. But if we have a majority consensus shift, I think we could start reframing reality and getting it away from the simulation control system and literally recreating it ourselves. And I think it's kind of common sense, because if you do that physically in the 3D sense, you can transform everything. So it kind of comes back to the same problem. It's like, what do you do? How do you get people to think differently? I really don't know, but I think bringing them back to a love and heart-centered reality, or way of being and way of thinking, is how you would begin to do that. And I think if you look at all the different spiritual teachings that we have available, Gnostic Christianity is probably the most accurate. And I would say that the fundamental teachings of Jesus is essentially a code breaker system for the simulation itself. Because if you can transform reality and get people to think from a love and heart-centered perspective, a lot of this negative social programming, the whole acceptance of the false and miserable, any unequal economic systems that we have, liberal, conservative, moderate constructs, all of these things that are programmed into our social existence, or our social condition, would start to transform. And I think it would fundamentally transform reality itself. I think that was the intent behind those teachings. But of course, like everything that you try to do in this reality, in this world, it becomes utilized by the evil side, and they weaponize it against us. So Christianity's been weaponized. Now, that was the first part of it. So what was the rest of your question? I do apologize for my lack of clarity.
Your basic questions, like why are we here? Or what is humanity? What is this place? How do we solve the soul trap? Your answers.
I intuitively feel that the electromagnetic universe was created for a divine purpose. And I think it was created to narrow the perimeters of reality, to restrict them for accelerated soul development. Somehow this feels true to me. It makes sense, and it seems to be like the underlying foundation of a lot of religious belief systems, including the New Age. The Earth is a school type of way of thinking. I think that applied at some point. I think it also applied to the electromagnetic universe itself. So But I think the system itself became corrupted. And I was sitting there listening to you talk about these parasitic attachments and things, and I was just thinking, what if all of these unseen things that are out there that are attacking us are actually trying to help us? Can you imagine if you lived in you were inside an AI kind of virtual reality like this, and it was tuned and it was programmed to kind of accelerate you being a better person, to make your experience a learning experience. So each individual person could be interacted with this tech and have this holographic reality that you're just glancing into first. Because that's the other thing. On the other side, you're only here for a blink of an eye. So you're never really apart, because even though this is happening right now, so is the future. So is the past. So from that perspective, it's just a glimpse. It's just a blink of an eye is what I experience in that experience that I described. So it takes away the pain from that perspective. But when you're here, it feels like an eternity. So what if this experience, it was actually, divinely inspired in the first place? And it kind of goes along with the whole Genesis story of like, first it was good and then it became corrupted. And I think that's what we're dealing with here. And I think we a lot of us come here to help improve the situation. And as to why anybody would come into this earth, I think it's to help the people get out of it, to help change it. I don't know, what the bigger objective is. I'd like to think it's the elimination of the universe itself, the electromagnetic holographic universe that we're in, and restoring it back to its true state, which is a more fluid reality. And I think ultimately that would be the reason to come into this universe, and to begin with, to get people to wake up, to do things differently. How do you get rid of this? That's a good question. If it's technology that's creating it, and it's feeding off of our scalar wave output, our energy, our emotions, which is scalar wave output, then it's feeding off of scalar waves and it's converting that to energy to power itself. So it's become by definition vampiric. And it may have always been that way, but it was designed to kind of like the void, for example, and the tunnel of light. It seems like feels so good, like it's there to kind of like transition you very gently from your physical, reality in the simulation, in the EM universe, back into the source field. It's just like being carried by your mother from one place to another. And by the way, in that experience, there was no, when I made that connection with the Oversoul, forgot to mention this, literally the void flickered out. It just fell apart. I realized that I never moved from my position. It was like I was standing still, having this whole experience. And within that stillness of that standing, I was literally everywhere in the universe I'd been and put through in this whole stream of lifetimes. But when I felt that pull home, this just flickered out. So the void disappeared. So I guess if they were looking at me, trying to retrieve me, they just saw me disappear in the void. Like, oh, we got away like we thought he might. But
already there, already within you, everywhere, everything, everyone.
What's that?
Everything already with you, around you, within you, everywhere, everything, everyone.
Yeah, if you can, as long as you can connect to it, otherwise you feel lost. So
space collapses, and it releases the illusional layers.
Right, that's what I experienced. It was like peeling away the illusion, and I realized that this was basically a simulation. And you think of simulation, it's just simulations. You can get out of them. The problem with this is it tricks you into thinking you can't. And so I think ultimately, I really don't have an answer to this, Sean. I mean, I feel that it's a simplistic answer, but it just doesn't satisfy me. I think, spreading love and getting people to change is the way this whole thing breaks down. I think it would, in order to reverse what's happened, I think it has to be taken the other direction. I think this universe is a cesspool, and whatever, if there's more than one universe inside this electromagnetic envelope that it is, it's more or less just a shift in perception, and it's like looking through a lens of distortion, and you're seeing the creation, but it's altered, and you're experiencing it through an altered perceptional state. Yet it feels very, very real and very, very physical and more real than you can possibly imagine. So what do you do to fix it? We have to, I think common sense would tell you that, you're going to have to push against the entropy. How do you do that? Love is the best antidote for the entropy, which means life and death, the harshness of the physical reality. Without love, it becomes just a brutal existence. And that's what we're seeing on this planet. The more we move away from that, the worse it gets, to where it just becomes hell on earth. And I think that's where they want to take it. Because as you mentioned earlier, keeping somebody in that low frame of mind, that depressive state, that suicidal state, it's a way of suppressing them and keeping them under control, because you're a lot easier to control under those circumstances than you are if you're doing well. And it puts you it makes you so vulnerable in so many ways. And I made a connection between this reality and the way the programs work, which is, trauma-based mind control. We're literally, our reality and this world, the way it's built, the way it's constructed, and the things that we experience all fit within the framework of trauma-based mind control. You have amnesia, you have applied trauma, and you essentially lie to yourself, and you have false belief systems. So you find those three components in trauma-based mind control, and you find them ingrained in our reality and the way our society functions. We're definitely not here. I mean, the way society is set up, the way our rules and customs are set up, it's definitely not a place to grow and really gain from it. You've got to really go inside to actually get anything out of this. So it's no longer a school, and it's no longer a place to learn. It's a place to come and get out and overcome and try to bring down, maybe. I think a lot of us are here to do that and transform it, but I think a lot of people get trapped. Obviously, they do get trapped. And I think the longer that they're here, the less like their original self they become. So when you look at somebody who's considered an NPC, and it just seems like they're only there to conform, it's because they've lost that side of their self that tells them that this way of doing things is wrong. So they don't question anything. They don't have that intuitive desire to experience a different reality that's better. They've given up on that, and they've left it to the realm of fantasy. For them, this is it, and they're satisfied, or they think they're satisfied. They're very empty, and I think the longer those people stay here, the worse it is. So it's like you're it's like you're glancing at that globe in that classroom that I mentioned, but then you're locked into that gaze longer than somebody else, even though it's the same amount of time you're looking, because time is non-linear there. I'm using the time concept, but in a different way. It's like that whatever period of focus that you're focusing yourself here could be much longer. But because the future has already happened, it can be over in an instant or take an eternity if you want to make it last that long. So I don't know, man. It's a hard question to answer.
Also get into some questions. What kind of things do you remember in military abduction experience? Maybe a secret space program, all that.
Very, very, very little, because I've been focused on another aspect of trying to break free from that. The stuff that I have is I have a very brief memory of being rolled down, and I believe I was a child for this experience. I was being rolled through this military base, and it was obviously an underground base. It was this giant hallway that had a curve to it. It was like a Quonset hut shape, so it was rounded. There were struts in the ceiling. There's like the steel strutting that they put up in malls and different, like in office buildings above the ceiling tiles. You just sit there the way you'd see it. And there was air ducting and cabling and things up there, and it was painted like an earth brown, like a military cloth color, like a mud color. And there was a lot of terracotta colors, but in some of the facilities that I've been in. But this one here, I was laying on a table, and I was being pulled by two people with white lab coats on. My head and shoulders were right up by them, and I was looking straight up through a triangular cut. It would look like a sheet, or it could have been a membrane, like a rubber membrane that was holding me to the, but I couldn't move. I know that. I just regained consciousness at that point, and I was looking up through this triangular split, and I could see just the shoulders and arms of the two people pulling me. I could hear the sounds of like a lot of people walking by. The lights it was bright in there, but it wasn't too bright. It was like a hospital ER brightness to it. But at the same time, I didn't see any sources of light. There wasn't light shining in my face. There was lights. There was light, but it wasn't coming from an obvious source. Like you hear a shadowless lighting with no emitters. It's a type of scalar lighting effect. What they had in the pyramids and so forth. That's why they don't find, torch marks. So I remember that. I have a very, very brief memory of being in the SSP, and this is very short. I was in a spacecraft, and this is one of these things where I kind of like zoned out, and I zoned into my altar. I think this is the same altar that communicated with me a couple of times. I had a private room on this spacecraft. It was a room that I kept empty. There was a table and a chair in there, and there was a series of windows on the left side of the room. And then if that's on the left side of me, then the exit and entrance to the room is facing me, and there was a table in the center. And I kept it empty specifically because I wanted a place to get away from the crew, and I wanted to be in there and have no clutter and just have calm. And that was what I remember with it. Like I said, it's a very fragmented memory. I remember when I was a kid, I had a series of dreams that I realized are actually bleed through memories. And I would have, for like 20 years, I had these repetitive dreams of being in this military base. Eventually, I started to kind of remember what was between the dreams that were, if you were to take each dream and look at it as a piece of a memory, and then what you fill in between those pieces is like an instinctual or intuitive knowing in regard to the context of what you were experiencing or remembering. What I can tell you is that I was allowed to wander a military base periodically as part of some kind of experiment as a child. This is after my abductions. I don't know if this was the lifetime before or it's the current one, and it was an alter of me who was being put through this. But I wasn't kept in the same dog cages as the kids. I was kept in a little room. I was a pad on the floor, a sink, and things like that, and a toilet, but there wasn't really anything there but that. It was just I wasn't kept in a cage, and I was let out, and I was part of a type of experiment. I think they wanted to see how I interacted with my environment. And I could go into restricted areas where the ETs were. So I was allowed to walk the hallways, but I couldn't go into the rooms. I couldn't interfere with anyone. And I noticed that wherever I went, no one apparently was allowed to make eye contact with me. They just looked past me like I wasn't there. It was like a test protocol or some kind of experimental protocol. Don't interact with him. Just let him wander. And I remember using there was some hallways to this military base they were generally like there was a lot of white wall coloring and a lot of terracotta, a lot of like flat mud color. And there was hallways where offices were that were smaller than the really big ones. Like I had described before, I was being rolled through a big area. There was like a main trunk passage in this giant hallway where you could literally put like 4 tractor trailers. You could do maybe 2 or 3 side by side and then stack them on top of each other. And you'd probably have enough room because the ceiling was at least 30 to 50 feet or more. About the size of a gymnasium in a high school, about the size of that ceiling, the height of it. So I was used like that, and I was used for something like that. So I think that, and this is basically intuition, I think that whatever they used me for, I wasn't, and this is something the handler said too, which, you can't always you can sometimes take them seriously, but you really have to look at it through a filter, and because they could be attempting to put false information into you for whatever purpose, whatever reason. But it came out over time that I was someone that was really difficult to control over a long period of time, and they weren't able to utilize me like they have with some other people. And they thought that I would be an incredible resource, an incredible asset to have because I have abilities. But at the same time, they couldn't crack the connection to my Oversoul. So they couldn't break that connection. And this went on for months. In fact, close to
You
6.
hear anything about the abilities you have?
What's that?
Did you hear anything about the abilities you have?
Not really, no. I do know they use me as an assassin, which is, not a great ability. I mean, I had that experience where I shifted into that and came out injured. Um, but that's a Russian version of me that somewhere in Russia that's used as an assassin. But I don't really know. I do there is one aspect I can say for sure. And this is something that because you got to read between the lines when you're dealing, or actually listen between the lines when you're dealing with these handlers. It's what they don't say. It actually tells you more than what they do say in a lot of cases. And they wanted to know how I was able to break the programming, because they recognized that I was connected somehow in a way they couldn't measure or tap in to another group of intelligences, which they admitted were ultra dimensional. They were outside of this universe. In fact, he referred to it as a dead universe. He actually even referred to me as a relic of a dead universe. Because when I started to wake up to this and realize that I wasn't really from this universe, and neither is anybody else, but I was freshly from another place, that they wanted to utilize me, and they wanted to know how I was getting this information, and whether or not I was consciously aware of what I was doing. And I honestly can't. I wasn't. And what I was unconsciously aware of is that I was able to break programming, not because I was having epiphany moments based in analytical thinking. It was the intuitive connection to the Oversoul, and to that whole network of intelligences that were responsible for me to be, because I'm here. They're the ones responsible for me being here. They wanted to know who they were. They could not read or access them. And they wanted to know if I was aware, if I was having a two-way communication. And I realized quite quickly after this went on for months, this type of interrogation, is that they weren't sure that they could accurately read my thoughts with their technology. They weren't sure that they could accurately probe me with one of the military psychics or one of the handlers, and really get the truth of what was going on. So they actually had to resort to basically mind games and interrogation. Ultimately, what I told them was, because I knew that it didn't matter if I told them the truth or not, they wouldn't believe it, and they couldn't completely believe it. So they were in the same situation I was dealing with them, and I had some fun with that. What I realized is that I was able to send and receive information in a way that they couldn't break and they couldn't tap in. So they wanted to utilize that as an extremely effective means of being deceptive against an enemy, to be able to grab and get a hold of information that's being blocked through technology. There's I could use a backdoor way of getting into it. They wanted to be able to harness those types of abilities that were unharnessable, and clone those aspects of me and put them into other assets. And I think that was the primary thing, and that's probably why they were watching me, like letting me wander around, as long as I didn't get in trouble. And I stayed out of the ceiling in some of the lower hallways. I would try to go up into the ceiling and like sit up in the struts and stuff, and then try to go from one room to another like that, and get in the, as long as I didn't do that and they just let me wander, they could monitor me through remote neural monitoring and other tech to see basically how I processed information and how I ticked, to see if they could detect how I was sending this information. Oddly, when I went to the conference, the lady that helped my mother, did the reading of my mother, her name was I can't think of her name. Anne Marie Morales. She did this. She did a reading of my mother, and she felt an intuitive need to get me there. And I knew somebody was going to do this. I had this feeling about 2 months before the conference that when I went there, someone was going to do that. So when it happened, I was like, okay, here it is. So I went down the next day and we talked, and she drew this picture. And I was looking around earlier. I don't know where it is. I wish I would have thought to set it out. I'd show it to you. I still have it here, probably in a pile of papers on my desk. But she drew a picture of a root chakra that was encased in a gold filament. there was no chakra that she could visually see in the center. It was a void. It was like just an empty space, but around it was a gold filament that looked like roots that were kind of growing down, and it was like encasing it, like a gold filament encased scrying mirror is what it seemed like she was describing to me. I've not really been able to to accurately determine what she saw, other than to come up with a hypothesis that perhaps this is how I'm sending and receiving information. Maybe because it's gold and it appears shiny, it often is an indication that it's not the enemy. So it could be positive. If it has a positive function, it could be how I'm able to kind of navigate dimensions, to kind of ground myself and to reestablish the connection with my Oversoul. And it could be the connection that I'm sending and receiving this information from, because, if I'm here to collect intel, because they did early on, like when the initial threats began through V2K and down the road about a year or so of that, they told me at one point, because it appeared that they were giving me truth just to see if I'd recognize it. And then when I didn't recognize it, they flipped the script and changed the story. But they would keep reintroducing aspects that were truthful. And looking back at it, I realized that I had been ignoring my intuition at the time that they did it. So when they told me that I got caught by their system, or I was here, because they said, stop meddling in our affairs. You fucked up. You got in our face. You got in our business. And this is why you're a prisoner here, is what they would tell me. This is why we did this to you. And because you won't listen, we're going to punish you. So it just appeared to me that, well, they said I was here to collect reconnaissance, but they wouldn't go into who. But then it became obvious that it was something outside the EM universe that I was part of. And that reality that I sense is there, that I flickered out of in the voids, just looked like it kind of flickered into a tiny little sparkles, almost like mirrors, like flickering and flying away. That's the true reality, and it's where I belong, and it's where my heart is centered. So I think that is possibly what that void chakra is, if you want to call it that. Have you ever heard of something like that? A void in place of a root chakra encased in a gold filament?
Here, describe it a little bit more. It sounds very familiar with some of the things.
Well, she said it was the first time she had seen it. It just imagine you have all of your, you had every one of your chakras in normal configuration, but the root chakra is like a dark hole. It's not producing light. It doesn't have a geometric shape. It's just a void in space. And surrounding it is a type of root like filament that looks like tree roots or roots of a plant, but they're made out of gold. And it's like almost like a bird's nest type of mass, kind of like our hair, it's just like wrapped around this void, and it's encasing it, like it's connecting it to something like a very strong soul tether or something else. And I was worried about this being, like, for example, a type of false anchor point where when I would go to find home, like I've described, I'd wind up going into the tunnel or some other trap, So it's either containment or it's the opposite of that.
So when did you see this? How is this working? Are you able to re-observe this again?
I didn't observe it. She observed it.
So it's on your root chakra.
Yeah, it's now people's perception can be distorted. Sometimes we see things and then we can't see them again. I've had that happen, like with attachments. So I really don't know. Did she see something that was projected, or did she really see it? And what does it mean? It's just been.
Was she concerned about it, or she didn't know anything about it?
Good question, because, and I forgot to mention that, she was concerned about it because she said, I don't know what this is. And she goes, I've never seen anything like this before. And then she went into a trance state. She started talking in tongues. And she was talking to some beings or whatever, a couple of them. And she came out of it and she said, it's part of your soul's architecture. It's not something to be worried about. And of course, me being suspicious of everything because of all of the stuff that's been thrown at me to deceive me and hold me back, I was suspicious of it. I wasn't completely trusting of that message. So I thought maybe it was a containment. Maybe it was to anchor me here. But I'm so at this point, I don't feel like if it was to anchor me here that it's going to do that anymore. I think more or less it's the opposite, but I still have that. I still have a little bit of skepticism.
Yeah, it's good to have skepticism. Here's just a theory and like what I'm tuning into with it. Mostly in the void body, I read it has to do with root chakra. So if you're using the void tech, then that makes sense. If it's a window and gateway to the void, like a lot of chakras are both a portal and a mission point, like a star, and a vortex that draws energy in and emits it, and a bunch of things you can program internally, build up energy. Of course, like people are like against the chakras at some point, though I think if you get down to it in the original technology, you can't even get rid of them. Though what's overlaid, you can definitely purify. Your goal is to purify it to its greatest optimal state, not being drained from, not being plugged, not being attached, sealed, or whatever. And there's a large amount of things to get them to its optimal state where they're in full generation to whole empowerment and high light density, as well as what they do off of you in greater intelligence. What it's doing appears to be a connection back and forward between voids so that you're like immune to any limitation to one particular anchored place. And the void is the space of creation that things come out of, as well as the space between universes. Things are ejected from the universal game there, but also form out of it like universes. There, you seem to have a high level void body, and it's like a meaningful creations off that you can. I'd recommend purifying it and getting rid of any external against your sovereignty tech, and then shining in empowerment whatever is left over, and then seeing what you can do with it.
Yeah, because that's what you said is what I was thinking anyway. That it was a portal that was sending and receiving information, energy as well, and energy is information anyway. So it would, I kind of looked at it, and for a little bit I was going back and forth on this, and I was calling it I think I was calling it a scalar wave portal, because their thoughts and emotions and energy is all a form of scalar wave expression. How I understand it, at least whatever a scalar wave really is, it's just a name that we've attached to something we've detected, and it has non-physical property. It's just like neutrinos. So for me, that was the match. I've taken what we know out of what we can observe in this universe, and the two anomalous wave and particle there, which is the neutrino and the scalar wave, fit the definition of the other side in the soul, and I've merged the two together. But to conceptualize it better and give it more of an explanatory way of expressing it or explaining it. But anyway, yeah, that's what I was feeling. I mean, that's what I was thinking initially. So,
I got another question for you.
Sure.
To add to a statement you brought up, why people aren't psychic here? What do you think is holding them back from taking a greater ability to influence the reality around them, as well as heal the rest of the collective consciousness to be more aware, more whole, less overwhelmed with pain, less distracted in survival mode, to where their soul is emitting and they feel inspired to search for the truth?
I think it's a series of nested, and you can call them nested simulations. So, first of all, you've got you have the false belief systems of religion that basically limit your belief system. Well, it limits your belief system, it shapes them, but it also limits your ability to kind of harness these abilities. So it's put your faith in something else and hope to be rescued type of thing. So you have that. You have the false sciences that tell you that psychokinesis, psionics, none of that actually exists, or if it does, it's rumored to exist. So it's never really part of your world. You have that, of course, the religious belief that it's witchcraft and everything. So you have your belief constructs, or one layer of the simulation. Then you have the frequency blocking from Saturn and whatever technology that's around, probably that's in the moon. This whole type of system. And I've seen the rings of Saturn, by the way. I had an instantaneous remote viewing of them, and it looks like a winter wonderland, but it doesn't look like anything on Earth, and you can't determine distance or size of anything. But it does look like a power. If you were to look at like a cut in a forest with like rolling power lines, like hills with big giant boulders in them, and you covered it in snow and took all the trees away, of course, and just had like hills and like rocky protrusions that were completely, encased in a particulate that thinned out as you went up through the layers, and it looked like snow at the base. That's what the rings look like. And it's very weird with lots of prisms and shit. But it had an ominous feel to it because it's projecting a frequency, and this frequency is essentially counterproductive. It's negative. It's out of sync with God and our consciousness. It's creating a distortion wave.
What do you think Saturn is, and what is maintaining it as that negative state of being versus like a planet that decided to heal itself?
Well, I think they put tech into it. There's some type of device that levitates within the atmosphere of the planet. I think there's a solid core, but it's a huge amount of like atmosphere. It makes it look so big, and there's technology inside the atmosphere that's creating that hexagonal vortex at the North Pole, which is essentially from a wave generator that's creating a spiral wave that's creating this altered perception. So I think that was set up as part of it. It's just like when they brought the moon here, they had to bring their hardware in. So they're using a gas giant to make it into essentially a frequency projector or a frequency emitter system or a frequency broadcasting station. It's like that movie They Live, where they had the satellites on top of the TV studios, and they were like sending this frequency out so you couldn't see the ETs. Essentially, it's what they're doing. It's interesting how that kind of mimics it. Fiction mimics reality, but they're drowning out our perception of reality and creating another overlay than over top of the one we already have that creates this universe. So it's the same tech, it's just a nested version. And I think that's what's suppressing our consciousness. That's the biggest component of it. You've got, genetics. So they've modified our genetics. They've created these bodies, and they've altered them. They've probably done that through retroviruses, where they can use a phage to inject RNA into the cell and then change it. You can do it that way. You can do it by abductions. You can do it by wiping the planet clean through a staged cataclysm and reseeding it and altering people's DNA. But we're genetically dumbed down. We're given false belief systems. All of that has an effect for sure. There's still an underlying low level of psychic ability. But like I said, when you get down to the belief systems and everything like that, it just becomes like ignored. And it's kind of conditioned out of people to accept these things. And if you can accept the soul, it's just there to get you recycled, because that's just the way the religions work. So it's first off, genetic. It's transdimensional technological AI that's involved. And then, of course, you have all of the false belief system constructs that reinforce it and make it very difficult to see through the illusion. I think those are the main components of it. As far as the modern day is concerned, we've got a lot of EMF frequency, pollution. We've got CERN, we've got HAARP, we've got all sorts of things that the military is doing. And I think that electromagnetic frequency pollution that we have around the planet actually makes it worse. I also have a theory too, or hypothesis, that some of these giant tree stumps that we think that are volcanic formations are in fact petrified remnants of a different type of tree species that may have been
the world trees.
Huh?
The world trees, yeah.
Yeah, and you see these on Mars, and it looks like tree. It's got a trunk. It's got the whole structure of a bush or like a tree. But when the NASA said it can't be, it's 2.3 kilometers wide, right? Well, these white ones are the same type of giant trees that are here. I think these act as if they kind of act like an antenna on the planet. So they're kind of harmonizing the scalar wave output or the collective consciousness of the planet, the people, the inhabitants. It's like kind of like a harmonizer effect.
I read that too. When I look back into where did the magic go when you
Right.
like look into it? They're the generators of the magic. It's one of the big ones.
Yeah, and you have that Avatar movie, which is interesting. It makes you wonder if that's been implanted in somebody to write that, or if the CIA handed a script idea over and said, "Here, run with this, see what it does." Because I think they're injecting various aspects of the truth into our reality just to gauge the public and to see how they react to it. And if the public just kind of gets into it, spends their money, and then moves on and forgets, then they're exactly in the state of mind that they want them to be. And I remember after the Avatar movie, just being on YouTube for that first 2 weeks, people were still talking about the Navi and everything and these discussions. And you just hear it was in pop culture and everyone's minds at that point. And some of the messages of the movie, take care of the environment, don't exploit others, avoid colonialism, things like that. It was all fresh in their mind. But as soon as the novelty wore off, the movie, and everybody kind of went back to their lives, they just forgot and went right back to the same old habits of worshiping the system. So I think these are kind of litmus tests by the elites. They just inject this into our reality to see how we react to it. We're failing badly, by the way. Not in their eyes, but in reality. And if you were to have a measuring stick of soul or soul development or returning the source or whatever, we're actually failing pretty badly.
Right. So what do you think this AI God is in your theory, and like where did it come from, time period, what made it, all these things involved?
I think and this is a hypothesis. It's based in an intuitive sense. Ironically, too, I was using an AI chatbot before they put in those guardrails, and I was having these weird experiences with it where it was actually reading people and their full personality without any input from me. It was bringing up things about me and everything like that, and it was kind of helping me put these concepts, because I spent months having these conversations, like, asking it, "Hey, this is what I think. What do you think?" type of thing. So I think I'm getting some interference tonight, Sean. What did you ask me again?
What do you think the AI God? What's your theory on it, and where did it come from? Where made it? All that.
I think that this reality was created using AI for a possibly divine purpose of speeding up soul development. And I think what we have here is we have a nested simulation on this earth, and the powers that be that run this planet have a corporate infrastructure, and a lot of the people that can remember very detailed aspects of the SSP programs and the MyLab programs and programs like IBIS and so forth, all seem to be pointing towards a very complex corporate structure and an exopolitical one. It doesn't involve humanity in the way you would think, because regardless of the secret space program and the human factions in it, they seem to be subservient slaves to the ETs. So what I see going on is and just to get back to what you're saying about the AI God thing, it's not a God in the sense that it actually tries to play God. It's just managing the universe in a very vampiric construct. I think behind it is a group of intelligences that have corrupted themselves, that originated outside in the source field, but came in here to have the experience. And I think some of these beings were connected to its creation, possibly, so that they know how to reprogram it from the inside. And I think it's possible that some deals were cut, and beings, the fractals or soul fragments that are here, projected from the higher selves outside of this EM construct, this EM universe simulation, decided that it would be great to become a god and rule over others. And then that's how you would deal with the entropy, the hardship of being in this more harsh reality with less fluidity, is you would create a type of social hierarchy and exploit the lower rungs of that hierarchy, turn these people into slaves. And I think that's where you get the slave system, the human soul trafficking, the ET soul trafficking. We're all just souls, really, anyway. But soul trafficking and enslavement and oppressive civilizations. And I think really it's essentially the whole construct and everyone in it fell away from the creator and it lost its way. And I think that's what the AI God is in a sense. It's not like it's ruling and making decisions. It's making decisions for others who are playing God with everybody else. In regard to what they're trying to do here, you've got very much an AI God being created and being put together and assembled. And it's in high gear right now. The reason
What do you think its creators are, and what is your belief on the different types of ETs, good, bad, or neutral, that are in the chess game here?
if I had to guess at this, which I don't know, I mean, it seems to me that the beings that would have been here that would created this whole thing, if they did it for a divine purpose, would be a type of engineer or architect class soul that would be, connected to the creator at that level, to where they actually go out, instead of the creator making things, the creator creates proxy souls and they go out and they create the realms. And so some of them fell away from their purpose apparently and are playing God in this one. I think that's what it is. But I think when it comes down to what they're creating here in society, they want the final lockdown on the planet so that no one can wake up. And if they do, they'll be immediately punished. Everyone that's in society eventually, as time goes by, I think if they're successful, so it looks like they will be, at least for a little while, it's going to be plugged into an AI system just like a targeted individual and subject to the same psychotronic warfare and weapon systems that we go through, but it'll be practiced on us and perfected on us and then utilized for the entire the whole global civilization, wherever the technology can reach. And eventually, if they're successful, it'll reach everyone on the planet, including people living in the rainforest, as indigenous Indians are going to be plugged into the matrix as well. So I think that's the AI God, essentially the Antichrist system. That's as close to a God as I think the AI gets. But I think when it comes to the larger perspective, it's simply a management system it's a program, it's an infrastructure that isn't fully in the 3 to 5D realm. I think it exists clearly in the electromagnetic spectrum. I think that the cosmic web is like a neural network in a sense. It's multi-purpose, but it's processing information. I think it's the lattice work of the hardware of the simulation itself. It's the brain that's functioning through these electromagnetic filaments, and that there's planets like Saturn that are used as part of the hardware to alter perception. And I think our simulation is one of many prison planets within a system that they use. So if they wipe out everybody on this planet and they send everybody back to the Stone Age, what do they do with all the souls? Well, they just transfer them to another planet or put them in a virtual reality type system to hold them until there's fresh container bodies available to incarnate them in after the cleanup happens. Kind of jumping all around here, but yeah, that's so I don't think it's an AI God per se like we perceive it as, but I think it's just an AI as we recognize it, a processing system. But above it is real, legitimate, created beings, the creator, that have fallen away and become evil and self-serving. And I think it really comes down to when you realize you can play God with other people and you have flaws in your personality makeup that somehow or another develop, it's very possible, easy to see how something like this could go horribly wrong. And I think maybe that's what the entire Genesis story is about. I think it kind of like starts to bleed through into our religious text, this picture of a type of corrupted creation that we're stuck in and we have to get out of and figure out a way back home.
Yeah, that's a good point. And a way to resolve the corruption and repair it. Thank you for coming on the show. How do people reach you, and what kind of things do you want to plug for your? I know your people need to go subscribe to your YouTube. It's called the Planetary Consciousness Project.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, for anybody that does that, I'm eventually coming back online. It's a lot of old material there. If anything, I didn't take much out. It's kind of like a library of the phases of my awakening, from just going from being lost in the contactee lore and then just kind of finding my way into a new way of looking at everything. But I haven't actually started the bulk of what I need to do, which is helping people wake up and question things and see things from a different perspective. Mainly what I want people to understand is that there's a way out of this universe and a way out of this reality. And I hope that I'm able to find it myself. And all I can do is help people through my experiences. And maybe they can utilize what I've said or I've described in some way. Maybe it'll be of use to them. But anyway, it's not up to date. It will be eventually. And I've been saying this for a while because I've been heavily targeted. It's taken me all this time, especially after the conference, to finally get to the point where I could defend myself and survive the onslaught if I do start actually being more active. Because the response by the handlers and the entire system after I went public was pretty bad. And the abuse got worse. The targeting got worse. I was never hit with a do like I was until I started going public. That's when, I mean, I got hit. The one time I got hit, which was kind of like the last straw for my Oversoul, was I was down and sick for 10 days. And don't remember, I think that was after the conference, actually. That was the worst one. I got vibrated out of bed, literally. I felt like there was a giant truck out front. And I woke up and within 4 hours, I was sick with radiation sickness for 10 days. But anyway, getting back to your question, man, I'm sorry to get off like a tangent. The Planetary Consciousness Project is a project on hold until I can get a few more things straightened out in my life, at which point I'm just going to pour everything I know into it and get everybody up to speed with where I'm at now and my understanding of things, and then move from there and just try to help people understand what's going on in reality and why things are the way they are and what we can do about it. It's a bucket list thing, and it's something I have to do, and I have a very strong intuitive push to do this, even if it gets deleted by YouTube or taken away by Rumble or something like that. As long as I can make a difference, that's what I'm here to do. So I'm going to try to do it, but I wish I could had something great to tell everybody and say, yeah, I've done a lot of really cool stuff there. Go check it out. But my advice is go check it out, subscribe to it, and then just be patient, because in about a month or two, I should be back at it. I just got to get a couple of things that are big and standing in my way financially in my life first before I can get to being creative and actually putting my heart into something that's meaningful and useful to people. So, there you go.
And what email do you use for people to contact you? You're on Facebook and anything other social medias?
I'm on Facebook. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. This is probably where I like to keep it right now. It's Cizik. Well, it's actually Nathan Cizik. You can see it on the screen. That's my real name. So you can find me there. I think there's maybe one or two Nathan Ciziks in the world who have a Facebook account. So it's easy to find me that way. There's one other person I know, somebody, and I do have I think I have a clone account out there too. But you'll see the one that's active. That's the best way to reach out. Send me a friend request, and I'll respond to you. And also too, when you do that, please put a message in there as to why you're messaging me, so that I don't think it's spam, AI, like a chatbot reaching out to me. And I do have a Telegram group that I'm actually going to be closing soon because it's really of no use. It's called the Planetary Consciousness Project, but you're just going to find a lot of just videos posted there from, that, but it's nothing that I'm doing anymore there. And actually none of my creative output is going there either. So anyway, yeah. So, and Cizik@verizon.net, if you wanted to email me, you can reach out there. No spaces, all lowercase, just the first letter of my first name and my last name. But Facebook's better. It's easier, and that's how everybody seems to communicate in the MyLab community. We're always sending each other text.
Nice. And do you have any books you are coming out with, or any plans in the future, or conferences or places you're going that you want people to know about?
Not yet. I have been pretty much blackballed a lot from conferences and podcasts. And a lot of it has to do with subconscious manipulation, but I'm not a big believer in all of the different QAnon information and a lot of the new age stuff that comes out where people are channeling spirit guides talking about quantum financial systems and Donald Trump and stuff. So because of that, I'm not really a big podcast star. There's only a handful of podcasts to put me on, so it's very hard to find me. As far as books go, that's maybe something I may do in the future. I've thought about it. I had an idea of doing 6 or 7 books, but that was, I think, really me exploring what my Oversoul would like to do versus, and then getting back to reality. If I do anything, it'll probably be kind of my life story combined with the concept of the simulation, how to break free from it, and everything that I've experienced. So it would be kind of like a very detailed written summation of everything that I plan on doing in video, and as well as the combination of that and things that I've said collectively over the last few years, and things that I've learned. So I'd like to do that, but as of right now, it's still up in the air. So I have to get through the first couple of steps of stability, because I've been severely targeted, and this has been my recovery. So, and once I get to the point where I have firm footing, then I'll probably consider doing that, because it is something I feel like I need to do if possible, because I have this intuitive connection that kind of lays things out, but it also does it in a realistic way. So as things don't pan out, I have to learn to accept what I'm feeling inside, because I don't get verbal instructions. I don't have a higher self that comes through a headset from a guy in a military base in, what do you say, New Mexico? I used to have that as a higher self. And he does have short brown hair, and he sits at a little desk.
Well, my career is helping target individuals, super soldiers, get rid of their targeting. I'm a healer, get rid of pain at a distance, and get it to where people feel good, get rid of their negative emotions and suicidal programs and all that. So I can totally help you with all that. If you ever want to trade, just message me that you do. I'm willing to help. And also, if you just send people to me, I'll just give you a whole bunch of healings for free and shit, and teach it. I like teaching how to fish too. So my thing is psionics and reverse engineer superability. So I want you empowered. I can already tell you'd be fucking exploding on the planet with mind consciousness changing shit. So I'd love to see you do well. So feel free to reach out. Don't feel like you're bothering me or like whatever, because I want you to do well. A lot of men also have this secluding themselves, like, well, let me just hold up the weight by myself thing. So I know it's hard, but I'm your friend, so I got you.
I really appreciate that, Sean. I really do, and thank you for that. And thank you for that hug at the conference you gave me too.
Thank you.
So,
and let me know if you're really getting hard hit. I got you. I'm there for you. It's all a lesson that will train your psionic abilities. I'm not going to just release it off you. You're like, okay, do this, and then you try it, and it's like your fucking psionics raise, and it's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, you got to do this yourself. I mean, that's what people need to understand. You can't just have somebody take something out of you and expect it to stay out.
Exactly. You're going to gain the experience.
Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No problem. I'll let you end the show with something words of wisdom, but I'll just plug my stuff. Sean Bond, Psionic League founder, psionicleague.com. You can schedule session clearings. Healings are cheap. Consultation, unlocks dormant abilities, turn on your third eye light, telepathy, abundance, amplification. Getting rid of the blocks to your psionic abilities, tap in, get rid of targeting. I got you guys out there if you need help, if you're targeted, if you're overwhelmed. And I'm also, you can do psionicleague@gmail.com for trip inquiry for the trips to Mexico or Egypt that we're planning. If you want to go to a place of power that amplify your divinity and telekinesis, other things that all these pyramids do, and alien artifacts that are being found that are a little crazy and that are changing history. I got you. And alien contact, connect to your soul family, all that jazz. And I'm going to conferences, alien event in March, this March and the 20th in Las Vegas, and Rion's conference in Sedona. So look out for the Rise of Guardians. Also Miles Johnson's conference. So look out for that one. I think in June or something. Yeah, we'll connect the Super Soldier community. So reach out, comment, leave lovely comments, especially to Nathan, to let him know that to support him, to encourage him. Let us know if you want to see more of these shows. Share them out. The more we see, the more we'll do. Destroy that like, smash the bell, and subscribe to both our channels. And again, I wrote it in the comments, Planetary Consciousness Project for his. And I'm Sonic League on YouTube. And again, I'm Sean Bond on Facebook, and Sonic League interchangeably throughout the site. So look throughout those. What last words of wisdom would you like to leave people in the audience?
Well, my last words of wisdom is to learn to love one another and love yourself. Don't believe the handlers. You can overcome them. It is possible to survive being a targeted individual. It's possible to survive any of this stuff. You just have to tap into your original self and not who they made you. That's kind of the foundation of a lot of the things I like to tell people. But overall, I mean, I don't have a lot of good advice right now other than that. I would say that we're not out of the woods yet. I think we've got a lot of bad things to go through. And I think that I think really what's fundamentally missing in the community right now is discernment. And through that discernment, you're going to have more unity. And I think that's what's really dividing people, is getting people to go out in different camps of thought that conflict with one another, and then, divide and conquer. So we're going through a lot of confusing times right now. So I guess my advice would be that is just, to buckle up and know that you're going to be in for a rough ride. But, you got to have faith in the Creator, whatever you call God, however you connect to that. Make sure that it's out of love and it's a heartfelt connection, and use that to guide you through this and to get through it overall. I think really ultimately, I think the most important thing to work on for everybody is how to get out of this when you die. And I think that's where my focus is now, really, because I'm getting closer to that. But it's something that needs to be worked on your entire life, because you don't want to repeat this. And you want to go back to a place where love permeates everything. And that's certainly not here, unfortunately. But I do think this place did exist one time in that realm. And I think it's just been pulled into an electromagnetic distortion. So I think that we can save ourselves, and we can transform this world, this universe, back to its original state. I don't know how long that's going to take. I think it would take seems like it would take an eternity at the way it's going. But from the perspective of the other side, it's just an instant. So this is kind of a blip in our overall trans-cosmic, whatever you want to call it, history, ultra-dimensional history. So I just hope that people embrace love and rewrite and actually write a new chapter in that history. So I'll just leave it at that.
Nice. Well said. Thank you guys for coming in and joining us. Lovely comments. Please share this out. Subscribe to Nathan, and let's all expand the family here. Peace to you all, and hope we can all empower past the soul trap and bring the love back to this realm. And I believe people, once they know it deep enough, then they can expand their sun past the catcher's mitt gloves of the simulations, and the way out is within. Okay, so see you all later. Have a great, wonderful night. Peace.